The Cuyahoga County Committee of the Whole meeting for Monday, October 23rd, 2017. Budget hearings continued. Will please come to order, and the clerk will call the roll.
Calling the roll, Mr. Miller.
Here.
Mr. Tuma.
Here.
Mr. Gallagher. Here. Mr. Schron.
Here.
Ms. Conwell.
Here.
Mr. Jones.
Here.
Ms. Brown.
Here.
Mr. Hairston. Mr. Hairston is absent at the moment. Ms. Simon. Ms. Simon is absent at the moment. Ms. Baker. Here. Council President Brady.
Here.
You have a quorum.
Thank you very much. Do we have anyone signed up for public comment related to the agenda?
We do, Mr. Chairman. Ms. Liu.
Good afternoon. Welcome to the committee.
Good afternoon. Good afternoon. I'm glad to see today we have a complete different category of the budget items to be presented. However, my question will be, all these departments, their effort is only on the county government, like this building, or they will extend that to all the services county provides. For example, if they claim that no money for shelter to pay electricity bills, do you think it's possible we can have a solar panel installed? If they complain the building has all bed bugs, centerpiece, all those things already inside the building, which is in between walls and there's no way for you to catch them easily, is there any way that one of these offices may offer some kind of innovation, some kind of help? For example, I did mention in a different meeting that volunteer came, they put a fresh paint of coat on it, but unfortunately the building has no proper ventilation, so the fumes are actually kept in. And you cannot blame all those people with COPD, asthma, seasonal allergy, all those people, their symptoms are all acting up. So if they really pay attention to maintain this building, to put innovation in the building, to offer services, all the related services, even you outsource them to other providers, maybe they can think about it too. Of course, if budget allows. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else for agenda related?
No, Mr. Chair.
Okay, and that brings us to item number 4, the main item of the day, and would you please read the item into the record?
Resolution number 2017-0182, adopting the 2018-2019 biennial operating budget and capital improvements program and declaring the necessity that this resolution become immediately effective.
Thank you very much. We now have printed budget books. They are on everybody's desk. And calling the first department, we have Director Rourke speaking on behalf of Department of Information Technology, including ERP.
Good afternoon. I'm Scott Rourke, the Chief Information and Transformation Officer of Cuyahoga County. Today I want to give you a brief overview of the IT budget for the 18-19 biennial. The budget was put together, and actually from an IT perspective, with the addition of the strategic plan that you've seen recently, we've actually started to transform significantly what we're trying to address. The key things we've focused on, especially informed by the strategic plan, is a new focus, or redoubling certainly our efforts, focusing on citizen services, business services, looking at kind of a 360-degree view of our citizens using data, so we can think about strategies like prevention. We can think about strategies like how do we coordinate citizens that have what I call complementary services. For example, folks that get benefits and maybe SNAP programs and TANF funding. These folks right now are largely operating within their silos. So there's an opportunity with technology to actually see where there's opportunities to create one-stop shop opportunities. So very exciting time. The technology is very mature. Cuyahoga County has a terrific opportunity to improve how we show our face to customers, how we do customer self-service, and we can do it more efficiently as well. The last several years, we've been consolidating IT, centralizing it from the respective departments, done a very nice job, built a very good foundation. With your foresight, we also have some big commitments on the most interesting layer of technology. So there's kind of this platform infrastructure piece. There's communications, there's a variety of different things, hardware. You may recall we've got a very innovative, cost-effective relationship with the state. On top of that, this next phase for us is very exciting. It's called the application layer. And with your foresight, we've invested substantial resources in our biggest applications ever, the enterprise resource planning system and the real property tax system. So very exciting times, and that's really the application layer, like a software layer, is where our citizens are going to see the big impact. They're not going to realize a lot of benefits from our blinking lights, but when we can change how we process and how they can help themselves online, as an example, it can transform the county. So working closely with the agencies, we understand this is a tight budget area. So we've actually done a variety of different techniques and cost savings efforts to support this morphing towards a focus on the citizen centricity, outcome orientation, and a high performance attitude. Addressing the first question on any budget reductions or elimination of existing programs. Overall, from a budget perspective, IT is declining about $2 million in the next 2 years, from about a $29 million number to about a $27 million number, with a slight uptick in 19 representing a special one-time purchase that's been planned. The $2 million is primarily attributed to a change in accounting policy for telecommunications. You may know or be familiar with the chargeback techniques. So a substantial portion of it is how we're treating telecommunications chargebacks between the executive office and the non-executive offices. We also have committed in IT for a significant cost savings plan. We are part of a strategic sourcing effort where a couple different agencies, the large buying agencies, have all committed to save at least $1 million a year for each of the next 2 years using innovative purchasing techniques. Some of you may have heard about recently, we've been doing some reverse auctions and a variety of other methods to drive savings. Started already this year, but IT is committing each of the next several years $300,000 in cost savings related to these efforts, $300,000 each year for the next 2 years. As it relates to new projects, generally speaking, we are trying to support, keeping the trains running, doing continuous improvement, but we do have a couple big projects funded in these next 2 years. First, we have roughly $100,000 to revamp the technology in council's conference rooms. The equipment is approaching end of life and support issues, so we are looking to improve their capabilities, replace them, support things like mobility and things like that with the recording and streaming of live video. Just a couple more items. Another item is, I mentioned the citizen focus. We do have an investment in 18 of $400,000 to do what's called constituent relationship management. What that is that's actually an Infor product that couples with the ERP, and what that does is that allows us to track customer complaints, for an example. So you could have folks in economic development, in HHS, maybe in public works. We're actually able to track each of the citizens, what their engagements are, and look for opportunities to coordinate our services, to follow up on complaints, to actually do data analysis on what are the most common complaints, how do we address them. So it's a very exciting point in time where we're able to actually collect data about our citizens, look at our services, and have a lot of economies by coordinating the care. For my example, again, being folks that get perhaps healthcare eligibility also would maybe automatically apply to TANF and SNAP and others. So kind of a one-stop shop opportunity, constituent relationship management. We have 2 trials already going on. Concrete examples would be the Department of Development is looking to coordinate with the Regional Economic Development System on business attraction and retention opportunities. So kind of like with this Amazon headquarters, everybody could talk about, hey, I talked to Amazon, this is what happened, this is what I heard they want. And so folks like GCP, Team Neo, and the Department of Development could coordinate on business attraction and retention opportunities. So that's a real project that we're doing in pilot now, aided by some free software contributed by Infor. Similarly, in HHS, they're also looking at that coordination across their 8 different divisions to see where they have opportunities within one touch where they can get multiple different departments to deliver services all at once. So exciting times, but we have budgeted in anticipation that those pilots are successful, $400,000 next year and $100,000 the year after for an Infor constituent relationship management software package that plugs right into the ERP.
While you're waiting here, I'll just note that Ms. Simon and Mr. Hairston have joined the meeting. Thank you very much. Please continue.
Thank you. One other area is we budgeted $125,000 in 18 for enterprise data architecture. Leveraging the enterprise system that we've got now, we're actually looking at how do we set the standards for communications between that and other systems, or many other systems that we have, such as those in Health and Human Services, such as we've been in discussions with the state. The state has completely different data structures than we do. We are looking to share data, to share compliance reporting. In some cases, we have new requirements that will be required as they come down really from the Fed to the state to us. So for $125,000, we're looking to set the standard over how do we set up things like customer address, name, what order, so that the systems can talk to each other, and it makes it much more cost effective for us to plug these systems together. And ultimately, we want to see data flowing all the way from our courts to our jails to the regional police systems, to our Health and Human Services, even to Metro Health, and then the state. So the vision is really coordinated care across these agencies over time. And our first step is this ERP and having an enterprise data architecture that we can start mapping to the other big partners of ours and within our organization. Security services. As you may have heard, Licking County right here in Ohio this February had a ransomware attack, actually. And so they actually lost all access to their data. It shut down their 911 systems. We've seen other folks, the police in Texas County completely lost all their data dating back 9 years. So the threat of cybersecurity, cyber threats has never been broader, wider. It is an area that we do need to grow. It's also a state audit finding. So we do have a variety of different security services, mostly small contracts, but related to the training, because a lot of these issues invariably are related to human behavior. Things like phishing, if you've heard of that, where people are clicking on things and encouraging malware attacks or facilitating it. Also monitoring, protection, and response to threats. So we do have a strong leader in that area. We do have great relationships with federal agencies, but we do need to put some wood behind the arrow and make sure that we are protected. The ERP, the good news is it's an integrated system. The bad news is that threats are going to scale much more widely. So it's past due time for us to tighten up our security area. Lastly, computers. We've been very conservative on providing devices, computing devices, tablets, namely, throughout the enterprise for budgetary reasons. We do have a new solution that allows us to very cost-effectively procure a little box attached to a monitor, and more cost-effectively than a computer, deploy it throughout the enterprise, and we can actually control it remotely and manage it and clean it, even repair it. So exciting new technology. We've got $120,000 budgeted for that in 18, and we're going to start with the conference rooms where we have different needs, and we would have different images, and we can set it up different for everybody's different needs. As it relates to any additions or reductions of personnel. Well, obviously, all these new systems, so the software layer that I mentioned is reasonably new to the county. Our systems are really from the late 80s. So there are new technologies, there are new skills, there is new language that is required. So we are looking to not make staff additions, but we are looking to transform our staff over the next couple of years. So via attrition, we plan on refilling these positions for more modern technology needs where they've got experience in things like change management, like project management, like security. So we do have a total of 10 positions over the next 2 years, 6 next year and 4 thereafter, that via attrition we are going to transform. So I just wanted to let you know that we do plan on professionalizing the workforce, matching these skill sets with the high complexity and these other systems outside of the ERP that need to come in and talk to each other. So very different skill sets, data governance, security. All these are multidisciplines that we are going to need going forward. So again, that's all funded by attrition. We've projected to go from 160 people to 159, all through attrition. So it's not so much a budget impact, but we are looking at transformation. The last question, I believe, is any issues with the recommended budget? And no, we are satisfied that we can take on this ambitious effort to focus on the customer, to improve services, to improve self-service, which will build capacity for organizations like HHS. The ERP also will be a capacity builder and free up a lot of resources throughout the region in coming years to better focus on, like us, on the citizen and the business needs. Thank you.
Thank you very much for your presentation. Can you send copies of your presentation to the clerk so that we can all have written copies?
Certainly.
Thank you. Questions by my colleagues? Ms. Conwell.
Through the director, through the chair to the director, and you said we're still going to stay about the same, 160 to 159, but that does not include the ERP staff?
That's correct.
And so the ERP staff, is this something, individuals that we will need long-term, or just until the ERP system is up and intact?
Yes, the ERP staff consists of about 25 folks that will be a new layer of skills for the organization. Again, it's called enterprise software. I certainly could go into the description of the roles, but these are very advanced skills that we don't currently have today. So there's about 25 folks we continue to rationalize. Originally, a third-party consultant told us we would need 32. We're down to 25, and we continue at a steering team, which is the chiefs in all the respective areas. We continue to rationalize, and IT certainly is looking for leveraging its workforce and giving them opportunities to, without replacing them. We think that IT alone can cover a significant portion of those. Also, other agencies are looking for, they're going to have productivity benefits. They also are looking for how they can leverage and support the ERP budget. So from a capital perspective, the capital for the ERP project will fund us for 18-19, so it's not a biennial discussion from my perspective. We don't think that we're going to have impacts on the general fund, but there is in 2020, we are looking on plans, which I think we're discussing the next finance committee meeting for council. We're discussing a variety of things. This is one of the prime things we're going to discuss in early next year with the finance committee.
So the new 25 employees, so far that number, you haven't gotten it down, will remain as county employees going forward?
Correct.
And do you know the total cost and COLA and everything that those 25 people will?
Yes, the annual recurring staffing number is about $3.5 million.
So that's an additional to your budget now, or do you have, can you incorporate it in?
Well, that's covered in 18 and 19. Those are funded with the capital. In 2020, there will be operating needs, and we think attrition throughout multiple departments will more than cover those 25 folks, including IT.
And so also, in moving forward, I know you said some attrition will happen in 6 in 2018 and 4 in 2019. Looking beyond that, probably 20 and 21, you'll continue attrition, so it kind of balances itself out a little bit?
I believe that's correct.
Thank you.
Councilman Tron.
Thank you. I guess I was trying to keep up with that. So ultimately, we're going to be adding 25 new jobs. So
Excuse me, Mr. Schron, your microphone is not on.
Thank you. So ultimately, we're going to be adding 25 new jobs, and you say it comes from the capital budget?
The ERP project is funded for $25 million, and it will go through 2018 and 2019. Leveraging the ERP budget, we're going to cover those 25 folks and any other related commitments through this biennial budget period.
Okay. The capital usually means investments in equipment and things of that. In my business, what do you mean by capital budget?
The ERP budget, which is $25 million, is funding those roles through 19.
So operational monies are being spent through the investment in the capital side, is what you're saying?
The project is slated to go through 19, so it will cover that staff through the project duration.
Okay, and so we're going to be going, basically adding roughly 15, 18% staff to your department. 25, 16, yeah.
I think a significant portion of those will be funded from IT attrition, and I think the ERP project will create a wealth of other opportunities for other agencies, and other agencies have volunteered also. These are leaders, like IT leaders that are working in the department, so like Director Dykes in HR has demonstrated an interest in funding the lead role because it's so important to them out of their respective budget in future years. So we are working on a plan so that to minimize the impacts in 2020. But again, this is a new layer that we don't support today. We don't have these skill sets, and we don't have the value of the software layers and the improved processes and the rich data for us to better serve the citizens.
I can understand you don't have the skill sets because it's new technology coming in, but I have a hard time believing that 160 people in IT don't have some computer skills that are doing under the old system that we're functionally operating the systems we're currently running with.
Yes, certainly some of those folks will have an opportunity to interview and participate in that project. I do expect significant people from the current IT force to apply for and secure those jobs and likely not require their old positions being filled.
So why isn't the 160 instead of going to 159? Why isn't that commensurate with that same 25 being reduced from your number?
With the ERP,
aren't they doing something? They got to be doing something. I mean, we're operating a computer system right now. We've been doing it for a long time, and that IT staff is currently functionally doing something. Are they not?
They are. In 2018 and 2019, we have to run these systems all in parallel. So we are not shutting down these systems, tomorrow. So unfortunately, we have to run them in parallel. So we have to keep the trains running and what we're doing today. So those legacy technologies, they have to operate until the ERP is finalized, is turned up, is stable, and the archiving strategies of the old data, some of which won't come over, is also stabilized. And
I thought last time when you talked, you testified that we were going to go with a hard stop. We weren't running dual systems.
I'm talking about from archiving from a data perspective. We're not going to just, so SAP has all of our HR payroll data. We're not going to just unplug it and have people go away until we're really secure and comfortable that it's an archiving strategy until we are confident that we can go forward and no longer need the old systems.
Okay, what is the expectation that you budgeted for that dual? Because last time when you talked, you did not tell us you were doing that. You told us you were going to, I believe, we'll go back and check the record, but I thought we were going to be switching from the old system to the new and that we were not running a parallel path.
Yeah, it's I
remember asking this very question.
Yeah, no, it's fair to say, I would say that it's not a parallel, well, I misspoke by saying it's a parallel, but there is a point where there is a handoff from where we transition from one system to the other.
Of course.
And from a staffing perspective, that will be a delicate balance. And if it's the same people on both sides, there's an awkward balance that we'll need to coordinate. So you've got a great point. We need to do more planning on exactly how that will work.
We're going live in January, you told us.
In the last meeting that we had, finance is going live in the second quarter.
Right. So I know because I heard that the date got moved because I was out of the country. But so it's now been moved. Instead of January, we're going live when?
In the second quarter.
Okay. What is second quarter? Because I know that's computer speak for anywhere from April to July. What is second quarter?
June.
Okay. All right. So now we went from January to probably, I'll just pick June 15th for a midpoint of the month. You've talked about the efficiencies. You used the word, it's going to be one-stop shop, and more efficiently doing our business. Tell me what that means as far as dollars, headcount, savings of the county as a result of investing 20 plus millions of dollars. What are the efficiencies and what are the one-stops that we're going to see as to what the product is in the, because you said, I think this is going to be beneficial to our constituent relationship management of our account.
Yeah, the projects I mentioned, which are ones in the 18 budget that are outside of the ERP, are two different focuses on citizen-related needs. Our websites and then the constituent relationship management. Those are projects that we are, I mentioned, my two examples that I mentioned are economic development and business attraction and retention. And in Health and Human Services, they're looking at coordinating the care across their agencies so they can have one eligibility recipient come in and apply for multiple programs in one stop rather than having to go to another agency and another agency and another agency.
So that's the CRM you were talking about?
Correct.
Okay, that's strange because I asked the very question last week when the Health and Human Services was up here and the director, and I said, tell me about how we're coordinating the CRM that's going to be part of the ERP system with your department. And he said he's had no contact with you on that subject matter as far as where the CRM is going to be producing this huge efficiency and one stop.
Yeah, Walter and David Merriman have been our point contacts in HHS.
So the director has not?
The director, Tom Pristow?
Yeah.
Director Tom Pristow has certainly been in the discussions, but the lead from that department has been Dave Merriman.
And we're going to be using a live CRM system as opposed to the state system that we're required to use?
Within his respective area, he is using the CRM, and we're hoping to actually span multiple different agencies. So
from Infor, the Infor.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
And this will result in. Can you quantify this more efficiently in one-stop shop is into dollars and cents, head count, people, time we're going to process it? Is it going to take us, instead of taking us 2 hours, it's now going to take us 15 minutes?
In our last Finance Committee meeting with Council weeks ago, the same issue came up. So we've got an appointment for the Finance Committee, I believe in January, and we also provided answered some questions to Council on Friday, and I believe you have a PowerPoint today that Trevor sent you speaking to this very issue. But we will have a Finance Committee meeting for Council in January to discuss this very matter.
So we have the data points right now, or do we have to wait till January to get the data points? As far as
I believe in your inbox you have some examples of what we believe will respond to that question.
Okay, we indicated that we'll see a big cost savings using your language, and the citizens will see a big change. Can you describe that big cost savings that the citizens are going to see as a result of this, or efficiency or effectiveness to them?
Yeah, the way the process goes, we can certainly give you examples of other counties that have done this. The process that we've got right now is each department is making their own decisions. They're designing their processes, and then the consultant's coming back and saying, here is what you told us, and here's how the software is going to work, and then here's how we're going to staff it. And then the respective leader, like finance is going to do this next. The finance leader will then say, here's how I'm going to get my workforce from point A to point B. And that's where we will know concretely some of the savings opportunities.
Okay, the county executive has directed that we would see a reduction in managed and contributions as a result of this deficit. What is your contribution from IT?
I'm sorry, I didn't understand.
What is the contribution that you are making towards the budget deficit that the county executive is trying to structure here to get a reduction? Give me a dollar value. That
we've committed $300,000.
$300,000 out of $25 million.
Yes, from an IT perspective, managing the $25 million project, managing a $9 million real property, there's 70 initiatives in the strategic plan, many of which, if not most of which, have a reliance on IT. So technology has never been more important. Our dependence on technology has never been more important. And again, we're shifting from a legacy which we have to continue to operate to the new world. So I think there's opportunities in the future, but right now we have to do both.
Okay, well, I didn't get a good solid answer, so you brought it back up again. How long are we running on a dual capacity? Because everyone, we're running, obviously, spending money. Are both of these systems budgeted in the current budget for this biennium that you're running on a parallel path for X amount of time?
Yes.
And what's the X time?
They are budgeted. They both are budgeted through 19.
So we're running a parallel path 18 on all of 19.
Correct.
Well,
and again, I don't. We're eager to shut them down. There's a variety of different compliance archiving risks that we're managing.
Okay. If you were to shut it down, do you have a dollar value that will result in our biennial budget that we're looking at here?
Yes, $750,000 of hard costs.
And so no matter when we shut it down, we'll save that money.
Well, there's lots of pieces in it, but we're looking, believe me, we're looking as soon as possible, as soon as we humanly can, to shut down any one of those pieces. They will not all be at the same time. It'll be opportunistic.
Okay, and the new roles of the new staff, the 25 new members, do you have job descriptions and everything like that laid out? Okay, all right. I would like to see all those. Thank you.
Council President Brady.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Hi. Actually, both councilmen got quite a bit into what I had on my mind. So let me just say then, for myself, and I think for other members, there's an uneasiness about the number of employees that you feel will be required pretty much right away for this. And one thing I didn't hear mentioned is I think there's also an ask, maybe not from you, but an ask for about 10 more people in IT to back you guys up.
No, what I mentioned is the.
No, I mean, I'm sorry. I'm not talking about something you said. I'm saying, isn't it true that there's a part of the budget includes hiring 10 more people in IT besides the 25 people in ERP?
Yeah, what I mentioned in my remarks were those 10. So what I mentioned is we are transforming our workforce, and so as attrition happens, and we think there'll be more than 10, but as attrition happens, we have 10 new needs. They're not new positions, but as positions free up, we will not replace those positions in its current form, but we have new needs that I'd be glad to describe that are very customer-oriented, that we would like to transition in, leverage in the same resources.
So it's not 35 new people?
It is not a net gain of 35. No, the IT workforce will go from 160 to 159 over the next 2 years. And then
so you're going to get rid of some people and bring in other people?
We think there's going to be a lot of voluntary attrition primarily.
Voluntary.
And we're examining, everybody in the ERP is approaching the point where we're working on our formal attrition plan.
So I guess this is the basis of this is that you believe that people that are have to be more highly skilled, you need more highly skilled people to be involved in what you're trying to implement than people that already currently work in IT.
In some cases that's true, but we are welcoming folks to interview for these opportunities if they have the skill sets, even if we can invest in them at a professional development level and have them support this, that we'd be excited about that as well.
Okay. Well, I know that we've been talking about implementing this system and working on implementing this system for the entire time since the first council began, and for quite a while. With the kind of budget cuts that are in front of us, I think at least I have some reluctance to okay or support so many new employees, until I understand better, which I don't, what exactly they're needed for, and exactly how they would be brought in. If it's 2020, then they'll be part of our budget in 2020. So we have to consider that now if we're going to hire them, because you plan to, from what I understand, you plan to begin to hire them quite soon, right?
Yes. We have 6 on board now, but the rest will be staggered over the next 2 years.
Okay. All right. Well, I would say that you may have to lower your. You may have to take a look at whether you can get by with fewer people than that.
Understood. And again, if you don't mind me reminding you, in I believe it's January, we'll have a finance committee meeting with council that's already scheduled, where we'll take up this very issue.
Yeah. Well, that's good. I'm sure we will, because we'll have to oversee the process. But in the meantime, we have a budget in front of us.
Director, to follow up on Council President, could you provide us a description of the 10 positions and how they're different from what you currently have and send that to us?
I asked for all 25.
Plus the same for the 25?
Sure.
Okay. Ms. Simons next.
Thank you. Just a question about consultant you mentioned. Do you have an independent consultant who's overseeing the process, a comprehensive process for this project?
We don't. We have completed an RFP and have, I believe it's in the system, that we've changed the scope of how we wanted to approach it, but I think we'll see in the next week that it'll go through and we will get an independent, it's called basically just project assurance, that'll take on a kind of a quality role and an independent oversight role.
Okay, good. So this has just started. You just started to go out to bid for that, and you've been working on this for a while. What was the delay in getting an independent consultant? Because I know there's been some glitches with having interdepartment communication and what's needed for the departments and working in your department, but we really needed this, I think, at the outset.
Yeah, based on the understanding of what the consultant, who's called Infor, based on their role and based on this role, we've modified the scope a little bit. The consultant, we've beefed up their ability in certain areas, and we've scaled down some of this project assurance just because it's in our agreement with the software company, which is a fixed priced opportunity. And so now that we have a firm grasp of the scope, we're going to RFP it right now.
So do you know if E&Y is going to be in one of the looking at responding to this RFP?
I don't have any insights into it. We're hoping to get as many people as possible.
Have they been helping with, because you did mention a consultant. I thought I heard you say something about a consultant in your testimony today.
Yes, when we were in the software selection process and some of the design, we engaged Plant Moran, which is a CPA firm with some experience in technology. They did the original setup, and they made what I was speaking to is they made a recommendation for our staffing of 32 folks, which we've already rationalized down to 25. That was my reference.
And with the comprehensive oversight through this independent consultant, do you think they would have anything to add with regard to the staffing requirements? Or is this already set? When they come in, they're going to probably have other ideas. When they look at the whole global project, perhaps that number might change.
I don't, having worked with similar folks before, their roles, they might provide feedback to us, but their role is mostly that we're realizing the benefits from it, that the software works the way that we said, and they'll actually, in some ways, like an internal audit kind of role to make sure that the software is functioning all the way through the systems, all the way through the different departments.
Might it be prudent to wait till we have a response and somebody on board from an independent consultant perspective before we go ahead and budget and commit to hiring these employees?
Yeah, the hiring of these, well, again, I don't know that they're going to be, it's unlikely they're going to look at our staffing levels, but right now our staffing levels are not, the RFP would likely be completed before we make significant progress on staffing. We've been pretty gradual on our staffing needs, and again, in January when we all meet, we can review that very issue, but I think we'll have a staffing plan from our business leaders who, it's not just my decision, the business leaders have to say what their needs are as well. So it's a steering team decision.
Okay. So the independent consultant, you don't think is going to have any insight to add with regard to staffing levels?
They might give us feedback, but generally their role isn't to look at that.
Okay. Thanks.
We have Councilwoman Baker, followed by Shroud.
Thank you. I'm kind of jumping in the middle of the ERP, so I hope my questions aren't perhaps redundant. Just to understand on the 25 employees that we're talking about hiring, in 2020, because these employees are being paid out of the $25 million you call capital, in 2020, when we get into our next budget, you will not be asking us to supplement any of those 25 employees because either through attrition or through those employees that are transferring over from our IT jobs now, it will be neutral in what it is we have in staff. Am I right to say that?
Yes, I would say that partnering with the business units, it's not necessarily an IT piece. We're talking about IT being integrated into the business units. So we will look at folks, we will see benefits and attrition from, like I talked to Walter in HHS. So they're excited about the opportunity. They think they're going to have great efficiency opportunities. And as a team, we're going to come up with a plan that it'll be budget neutral.
Be budget neutral.
Correct.
That's okay. Also, I also heard in other meetings that we've had discussing ERP over the last 10 months or so, the contingency that has been put in place has been exhausted. So we still have 2 more years on this on moving forward. Is there any reason why we should be concerned that the contingency has been spent?
Yeah, I wouldn't necessarily characterize the contingency as being spent, but that is the topic of our January meeting. So if you want, I can go into it now, but to date, we haven't spent any of the contingency. What we're looking at is leveraging the contingency to carry some of the operating expense, what could have been or were planned originally to be operating expenses in 19.
So if I heard you correctly, the contingency has not been spent, and that we're going to leverage that for. Okay, can you repeat that? I'm not sure.
Yeah,
the contingency that was in the 25 million that was to be there for unforeseen incidences, as you would in any construction project. Mm-hmm. Now in 2017, as we're ending, and we still have 2 more years yet.
Yes,
that money, I believe I remember hearing from another meeting like this, that's been spent. It's been gone, and we are now running on the 25 million of whatever's left.
Yes, so far on the ERP budget of the 25 million, we've spent about $2.5 million. So the contingency has not been spent. In the January meeting with council, we're reviewing the contingency items, but there are some areas where we're over. There's some areas where we've got an abundance. And so we are recasting the ERP budget with all the new information that we have, a lot of decisions that we've made. And in January, we plan to get you comfortable that there is adequate contingency resources and that will still be budget neutral in 18 and 19 for this biennial.
If I may, what was the contingency amount?
It was 4.4 million.
4.4, and you said we spent 2.5?
To date.
So why was it said that the contingency was spent back a few meetings ago? With the project extending into 19, we've committed the ERP budget covering what used to be planned operating expenses. So we planned on operationalizing and going on the biennial budget in 19. With the project pushing back, we're leveraging the whole 25 million, including contingency, to cover the 19 and change it from operating to this bonded funding because the project is pushed back. And you will bring us that in January, how that all played out and what more how you're going to be able to move forward the next 2 years. Sounds like reorganizing the dollars. Am I right there?
Yes, we knew going into this there were a lot of unknowns. There's now a lot of knowns, and so some of them are favorable developments, and so we're still comfortable with the approach.
All right. My last question. I know we here in the county are on a cash basis, and I believe I remember hearing the last time we talked to those from ERP that it was on an accrual basis. Which are we on? And perhaps we're on both. What is the idea behind going to the accrual basis to begin with?
Another complicated question. That may be a better question for fiscal, but I'll try. Get Dennis. I will try the tech version of it. I would say that my understanding is today we are a hybrid in certain instances of both cash and accrual. Mm-hmm. And that in the future, there's opportunities to use the technology to continue to support those needs where it makes the most sense for either. And so the consulting company's done a nice job coming up with ideas on how to accommodate the best interest of the county, regardless of which one it is. So I think we're satisfied right now that everybody's needs will be met regardless of the accounting method.
If I just may follow, there's no increase to running a hybrid method of doing it. I mean, it seems like extra work. Why not just go on the cash basis and keep it as we are now, just to make it
Well, I think consistent? We're on a hybrid now, and I think the direction we're going, Dennis it's Dennis's decision, but I think the way that we're going with the steering committee, I think everybody's going to be satisfied that we're going to do what's in the best interest of the county and get the best out of both worlds. So I think we'll be doing both, and I think everybody will get what's best for the county and their interests.
Okay, if I can just have one more. I wanted to follow up on Councilwoman Simon and her question about the oversight. Mm-hmm. So I'm not sure I quite understand your answer back on that. Wasn't there supposed to be in the project plan someone that was supposed to give oversight back to the executive and the county council so that we can follow this progress with an independent eye? Where is that? And why I've been here 10 months and haven't seen it, and I know this has been going on before that. Why haven't we gotten that report? Why hasn't that been done? Why are we asking questions, I guess, that maybe we could have had answered if we would have had that independent oversight?
We did budget project assurance. We did have a very broad role that we learned had some overlap to our consultant, and we didn't want to pay for redundant activities. Again, the consultant's on kind of a fixed price piece. So we have shifted the scope, and now that we understood from the consultants better what they would do, what their role was, and what our needs were, we've now redone the RFP, and we have it ready to go, and it'll go out this next week. If I believe it's in the system today.
Okay.
I'm sorry, Mr. Chairman.
Councilman Tran is next.
No, it's okay. I'll defer to the president.
It's just a follow-up. I mean, let me just get this straight. You just now came up with a request for proposal that you're sending out next week on the issue that the councilwoman asked about?
We've had an RFP written since the beginning of the project.
Which is how long? About a year and a half, or? It doesn't matter. Okay. The thing is, what you're telling me is it's coincidental that simultaneous to these questions that you're doing this. From a steering team, so I'm up here standing, but there's actually a bunch of chiefs behind me on the steering committee making these same decisions. As a team, we've been discussing what we want out of it, better understanding the consultant's role. So with those developments, the timing. So it's just coincidental that we're right in the middle of this question, and we're right in the middle of budget hearings, and you're implementing this now. What you have not been able to do or willing to do or didn't do, at least in the last year and a half, it's happening now. I think everybody's been, unilaterally, everybody's been very supportive of it. Of the many things that we're working on, this is one that we certainly would have liked to have seen earlier, but we have also been in the trenches working on non-trivial issues and change management and training, vendor upheaval. You may recall they got bought, and so we've had a variety of things competing for our time, and this should be a priority, and it is at the top of the list. All right, I'm sorry to interrupt. Thank you.
Councilman Tran, anything further?
Yes, Councilwoman Baker did open where I was going to go, which I was waiting for it to get to that point on the cash and the accrual. You keep records of, I assume, of every meeting that takes place in the background and in the steering committee? You keep a written log?
I believe we do keep minutes, yes.
No. You do or you don't?
Yes, we do.
Okay, all right. And would those records show when the discussion of cash versus accrual was first brought up, as far as in the conversation in regards to our county and the way the whole ERP package is being set up?
Yes.
And when was that? When was the discussion about whether we're on a cash basis or an accrual basis? From the very beginning, day one?
Yeah, the way it comes to, so finance has just gone through kind of defining their to-be and their future state, and recently we've come to, at the end, where do we need to make modifications to the software? And so that issue has become one of conversation, because we now know all the different areas where finance has received feedback from the vendor on what their recommendation is. And so to make sure that we realize the greatest benefits from the ERP, both technology and in for the vendor, make recommendations. So we're now at a policy level, everybody's informing everybody, and then we all agree to move forward with the decision trees in the road.
So recently, we received a recommendation from Infor to do what in regards to cash accrual?
Their recommendation was that where we can, that we use accrual basis.
And were they aware that we were a cash basis at the very beginning, on day one, when they got this contract?
Yes, the assumption's always been that we're doing best practices. They provided research, and they made a recommendation with a modest business case of why they thought that would be a way to go.
At the very beginning of the process. Your records are going to show that they were fully up to speed, that this county is a cash basis.
No, I think we've always defined our processes as a hybrid. We do cash and we do accrual. We are GASB. At the end of the year, every year, we pay somebody to actually make us look like we're accrual. Their recommendation was that we go with full-blown accrual, and Dennis provided them feedback on where he didn't think it was ideal, and they've accommodated his request.
And that came in just recently?
Yeah, we're in the process now where we're making those decisions. Finance, which is first in the project, just came to a point of the decision tree on there are a variety of elements where the consultant is saying, here are the things that we should talk about one last time. We may have coached you during the way, but it's your decision. We don't know everything, but based on our experiences, we want you to take a second look at this. Okay,
so your coaching will show that you coached to try and drive our finance director, Dennis Kennedy, that he should be choosing an accrual basis. I'd like to see those records, okay?
Yes.
Yeah, it's a public document. I'd like to see the records that shows that. Thank you.
Mr. Chair.
Ms. Simon.
So is there a cost associated with this initial quest to move us to an accrual system, and then at the very last minute consult with Dennis Kennedy, and now we have to shift back? Is there a cost associated with this?
I believe right now we've got an approach that accommodates the cash and the accrual basis, and I would need to double check the cost, but I don't believe there's significant costs involved with their latest recommendation, which is just a week or two old.
What about the work that's been done, though, to date with this consultant? Have we paid them to go through the effort to convert us to accrual, and now we have to come back and back? No?
No.
And who is this consultant? Infor,
our software and
whose Project Drive? Is there a Project Drive?
That's the same.
It's the same, Infor and Project Drive. And we did an RFP for them originally? Okay. Yes. I don't know, Mr. Chair, if it's appropriate to ask for Dennis Kennedy to speak to any of this, and if he would. Next time. He's up to talk about this, though.
Can we try to finish with the director, and then when we bring up Director Kennedy, if people have questions for him on the subject, we can include them.
Okay, so just a question about the redundant roles that you referenced with the RFP. Can you give us a list after this of what redundant roles that have cropped up with regard to the RFP and overlapping roles? So I understand that functions, sure. Redundant functions.
Yes.
Okay, thanks so much.
Director, a couple quick questions. The budget book referred to 27 additional people for the ERP. You're saying 25. Does that represent an additional refining of the number of people down from 27 to 25?
I'm sorry. I usually try and refer to the 25 to 27 is the range. We have some steering committee meeting coming up where they will decide for their respective departments what their needs are, and there might be continued modification of that. We continue to try and work that number down. It was 32, it was 27, and we'll continue to try and...
So it's 25 to 27?
Correct.
Okay. And Director, I know that the implementation is a multi-stage process, and we now have the first stage implementation target for June of 2018. what is the target date for full implementation of all the phases?
Right now we're looking at modifying the approach, but based on a variety of the discussions that we had here, and we're looking at accelerating certain areas like public works and HR, so they might actually have an opportunity to accelerate. But I would say in the middle of 19, it may accelerate. HR's last. It may be sooner, but in mid-19, we're expecting to have all the modules, and that might improve.
Mid-19 for full implementation. Okay. Yes. Yes, Ms. Baker.
Just one point of clarification on the 25 new employees who are new but will be replaced through attrition or through other employees that are going to be transferred over. Will you be prepared to let us know, given we're going to be neutral in 2020, what the additional training costs are going to be, if there is any, what the increased in salaries perhaps can be? I guess I thought with the ERP we were going to reduce the number of employees through attrition and not have it be neutral. I thought this was going to be perhaps less employees that were going to be needed, perhaps because of their higher level skills. Will you be prepared to let us know what additional dollars will be needed? One, because of the higher level staffing that will automatically, I'm sure, will drive higher costs. And then secondly, how much training dollars are going to be needed?
Yes, I believe in your email you'll have examples of where we think, not just in IT, but the other agencies, what their impacts likely will be. And yes, those impacts will be significantly greater than the 25 or 27 that we speak of.
Okay, thank you very much, Director. Next, we have Office of the Fiscal Director, Dennis Kennedy, and before we start with your presentation, I'd like to ask if anybody has any questions related to the ERP for Director Kennedy? Yes.
Fiscal information regarding cash or accrual. You heard the conversations that you were involved in these discussions. It sounds like at the very beginning, 18 months ago, 2 years ago. At what point did you suggest or say or what would be in the best interest of the county, and what was that recommendation to the ERP program?
Mr. Sharon, it was our assumption at Fiscal that the system was designed to be a cash basis all along. We were not aware that there was any kind of decision point to be made about that until the beginning of October.
And this is October.
Yes.
So we're talking this October, not 18 months ago or 2 years ago. Yeah.
Yes.
So we're talking within, let's see, today's what, the 23rd? So in the last 23 days.
Yes.
Approximately. Okay, that's my question. Thank you.
And Ms. Conwell?
Through the chair to Director Kennedy, you heard it was it's moved in sort of into a hybrid situation, and I believe Director Rourke stated that there were some discussions of how that hybrid would roll out, or you had stated what you had felt about. So can you share with this committee what your questions were or where we're moving in terms of hybrid?
Sure, Councilwoman Conwell. We have a meeting tomorrow, actually, that is scheduled to review the progress of the vendor to come up with a design that matches our current configuration. Just for general knowledge, the county is a cash basis operating system, as are most of the larger counties in the state of Ohio. We convert our financial statements to an accrual basis in accordance with GAAP procedures at the end of each year. That's necessary to produce the comprehensive annual financial report. If we did not undertake a CAFR, we would not have to do that conversion, but we choose that route. The majority of political subdivisions in Ohio report on a cash basis. The system was designed, in our eyes, to mirror the current configuration because we get everything we need out of a cash basis. If we move to an accrual basis, there's certain risks associated with that, mostly around revenue projections because everything is based on estimates, and you run the risk of then over appropriating monies based on revenue estimates as opposed to cash. The primary difference between those two systems is in accrual, you recognize the revenue when you propose it to be received, not when it's actually in the bank. Similarly, on the expense side, you record an expense when you acknowledge it as opposed to when the check for the expense clears the bank. So there's pros and cons to either. Our choice and my recommendation was to stay with a cash system. It also comports better with our budget process too, to have a cash system.
Okay, so you recommended cash system. How far did that go up? Did they really listen to how we've been already institutionalized of how we've been doing things? Why did we still proceed to look like we're going for a hybrid when you definitely gave your good reasons why we should stay on a cash system?
Councilwoman, that it was my assumption and the fiscal office and the treasurer's office that we were on a cash system in terms of the design. Once we identified the change or the proposed change that the vendor had made, I did communicate the fact that I think it needs to be a fiscal office decision and not a vendor or steering team decision. I believe that recommendation has been followed. As I said, we will be meeting tomorrow to see where the vendor's at with any kind of changes that'll be necessary to the project to accommodate a full-based cash system. Again, we just need the accrual possibility to do our year-end accrual so we can continue to produce a CAFR.
Is that an additional cost to that if we move from a cash system to an accrual system?
I'm not sure, Councilwoman, of the exact cost. There could be change orders that are required. There are, however, a number of change orders that are built into the contract, given the fact that things would change, especially in terms of this RFP was originally designed like 4 years ago. In terms of the actual cost that it could pose, I don't believe I have the answer to that question right now.
Thank you.
Councilman Tron.
Thank you, Mr. Miller. Just so I have complete understanding, the RFP that went out, did you see it the 4 year ago RFP? I know you might not have been actually part of writing it, but did you see it?
I did review the RFP. It was already out.
Right.
Councilman Schramm, when I arrived at the county, they were actually starting the demonstrations of the respondents. So that was, the RFP had already been developed and responded to at that point.
Did the RFP indicate what kind of basis we are under, whether we're on a cash basis or an accrual basis?
Well, the RFP, what was asked of the vendor included the ability to do cash basis financial statements with year-end accruals. Okay, so the year-end accrual is, if I understand it, is for an understanding of our finances as opposed to how you actually operate the business. Is that correct? Sort of, sir. It's necessary to comply with what the auditor's requirements are to produce a comprehensive annual financial report. Right, but your day-to-day operations are done in which method? Cash. Okay. And if that was what the RFP said, it would be, I guess my simplistic way of looking at it, that would be like building a house and understanding the foundation of which we're going to build this house upon 4 years ago, and it was built upon the concept that cash is the way in which we operate our business. Is that a correct statement? Councilman, that was my understanding, that it was to be a cash basis system, and we're hoping to get that back on track relatively quickly.
Thank you.
Okay. Anyone else? Ms. Simon?
Just a quick follow-up on this. So were you not in the room initially when the consultant was coming up with this proposal to have this hybrid? I don't understand. At the beginning, Chief Financial Officer of our organization was not in the room with a consultant to talk about any of this before they proposed this change?
Councilwoman, as I stated earlier, the first time that I knew that there was a change was earlier this month, and the vendor provided some recommendations on our options as to which direction to go.
I just wanted to be clear. How does that happen? I don't understand how this process can be operating in a vacuum. You should have been the first one to be in the room to talk about. And is it, I mean, I asked a question about cost, you know, going forward with this proposal and coming up with a hybrid and looking at the accrual. Do you know whether that's cost the county money that could have been otherwise saved? I don't know how this consultant's being paid. Is it monthly? Was there time spent that we're being billed for to go through this proposal to convert us to a hybrid, or is there a cost?
Councilman, I would have to look into that. The consultant is paid basically on performance points during the contract. I don't know off the top of my head, I'm sorry, if there was any work billed in there. I am pretty sure that there was no itemization of any billing that would have been able for us to ascertain if it was a cash system or an accrual system. But they're paid on performance points during the contract.
So do you know whether you're going to be more actively involved going forward with this ERP process and be in the room and be with the consultants to help guide us in terms of moving forward?
Councilwoman, I am on the steering committee, and I would hope our involvement would be increased over the remainder of the project. There's certain involvement that we've had up front. The fiscal office is basically the front end of this whole development. We've struggled a little bit in balancing multiple priorities with the staff that we have. And there's been some recent changes that I believe Mr. Rourke referred to in terms of change how the process is going to be from here on. But I would hope, yes, that we would be intimately involved from this point on.
Great, thanks.
Please proceed to present the fiscal office. And I know we have a lot of questions about the rental registry, so if you could present that in some detail as part of your presentation, that would be good.
Yes, sir. Thank you. I would like to just start off and just summarize the various components and segments of the fiscal office. We're responsible for financial reporting and the completion of the audit on an annual basis. We're happy to say that our audit reports are getting a little bit better each year. We've gotten the best opinion that we could have received from the auditor state the last 2 years, and we're hopeful that we can continue to make progress along those lines in the future. We're also responsible for the Office of Procurement and Diversity, the Office of Budget Management, the Treasury, which Mr. Murray will be giving a little more detail later this afternoon. The Recorder's Office, which includes the Administration of Transfer and Conveyance. We have a real property department that maintains the values for all the properties in the county. We have an appraisal department. We also have a department for the Budget Commission, which works with all the political subdivisions in the county. We're responsible for auto title. We have offices at Golden Gate and Mayfield Heights. We have the main branch in this building, Southgate, Parma, and Great Northern. We're responsible for the microfilm department, general services, and the call center. General services conducts the administration of the dog licenses, cigarette tax, vendor tax, that sort of thing. We have a call center that handles all the call responsibility for the fiscal department. We also have accounts payable and a segment, the end segment of our current payroll process, which is handled in fiscal. And I also am responsible for the budget for the Department of Consumer Affairs. On top of those day-to-day functions for all these departments, you remember those, it was a merger of the auditor's office, the recorder's office, the treasurer's office as it sits now, and part of the clerk of courts. We also play a big role in a number of huge projects that the county is doing right now. We've discussed previously the ERP. We have pretty extensive involvement in that in terms of our commitment to staff levels, to design, and hopefully future testing of that work as it continues. As I said, we were in the first stage. We have made it through this first stage without adding any huge numbers of personnel, and we're going to work to continue to get the critical vacancies that we have now filled. We're still short a few positions from where our regular base should be. We also are responsible with a team from the operations end for a real property system. That's the replacement of the tax system for both our real property department and what's used in the treasurer's office. That project is fairly extensive with all the changes that have been made to date. That's roughly a $10 million project, and that will be coming up next year as well. We play a critical role in terms of the involvement of major financing deals for the county, such as the Arena Bond project that just closed. Previously, we're involved in the financial considerations for the Metro project and the Huntington Park Garage. And we're responsible for the management and coordination of our fiscal advisory services contract. Everyone knows Mr. Offermat, and he works very closely with us in reviewing not only those potential deals, but to follow up and make sure that our compliance to all the aspects of bond issues are done correctly. And on top of that, we have the continued statutory requirement of completion of the appraisal next year in 2018. So on top of all the day-to-day work we have a lot of extensive involvement of that. I've been happy to say that we've been able to do this without any kind of widespread expansion of payroll. We also look to our staff first in terms of trying to go out and get consultants to do things. So we're kind of trying to hold the line in terms of the budget with respect to the executive's request to address the concerns of the budget deficit. I'd just like to summarize some of the major initiatives that are in this year's budget. We're proposing a reduction of $300,000 per year for some prospective consolidation of positions due to the ERP and or the real property tax systems. I don't have a lot of detail on where those consolidations would come from. We're not far along enough in those processes to identify those. We do not anticipate any kind of layoffs. We're just going to kind of address things through attrition and not replace positions that were previously funded. We're confident that the efficiency of both the ERP and the real property tax system will allow us to cut our staff incrementally throughout those 2 years. So our budget submission contains a reduction of $300,000 per year. We also propose to increase the amount of the transfer from the Certificate of Title Fund in 2018 and 2019 by roughly $1 million per year. The auto title bureaus have been very successful. We have extra money in those funds, and given the level of the financial difficulties of the county, we're committed to transferring an additional $1 million. So in our appropriation request, because we have to appropriate that as a transfer, you'll see that it looks like our expenses are going up a little bit, but that's merely to make sure that the transfer can get recorded to the general fund. The Office of Procurement and Diversity was originally scheduled to complete a diversity study related to procurement within the county. That was to be this year. We're going to move that in the budget into next year. So you'll see that modification as part of our budget submission.
Director, you're talking about what we typically call a disparity study to,
yes, sir,
to succeed the first one that we did. Is that correct?
That's correct, sir.
Okay, thank you.
Subsequent to the completion of the appraisal next year, we anticipate the return of some of the amount of the Real Estate Assessment Fund, otherwise called as the REA fund 2 local political subdivisions. We're currently projected to have a year-end balance this year in the REA fund of approximately $18 million. Just for a reference point, at the completion of the last appraisal, full appraisal in 2012, $5.25 million was returned to all the political subdivisions within the county. So we'll be hopefully keeping the expenses, future expenses on that fund in check so that we can maximize the return to all the political subdivisions. We estimate approximately $2.5 to $3 million in assessments related to the non-compliance of rental registrations. I can discuss that a little bit more in a minute. Just to let the council know, I did do a presentation to the Mayors and Managers Association in late June, laid out what we were contemplating and wanted to see if there was any resistance from the local level. By the time we were done with that meeting, the Mayors and Managers had offered to give us a resolution of support to continue in this direction. So I'll get through this and I'll touch back on that in a minute. As I said, the treasurer's up after my presentation. He will discuss a little bit more detail in terms of the specifics of our efforts to improve property tax collection and also address some of the options we have in terms of investment strategies to improve our investment income in the future. I'm happy to tell everyone we've been working very proactively with the prosecutor's office on enhancing our tax delinquency collection efforts, and we're trying to find some new ways to move delinquent properties, particularly ones that have huge delinquencies, back into an active pay status so that we can get those properties back in circulation and receive some kind of tax from this point forward. So we've had a good relationship with the new prosecutor. We're coming up with a joint effort in terms of putting together a team to address some of these delinquencies, and I think that'll bode well in terms of the future on our collection efforts. We also intend to develop a community-based appraisal review that incorporates the concerns of all the local political subdivisions when we get more deep into that process. We've established a good working relationship with mayors and school administrators as part of our appraisal and budget commission, and I hope that a lot of those folks have not been burdening you with a lot of problems, but we've really tried to go out of our way to tell them all the positive things that are involved with the county and to work with them very closely in terms of their concerns, not only with their budgets and levies, but how the appraisal is going to impact them. So we promised the mayors and managers that we'd be back out to talk to them in the future and hope to make them at least aware of our preliminary decisions so we can take their concerns into account. In terms of the budget specifics for the 2018-2019 budget, during my first 2 years with the county here, the fiscal office has registered expenses considerably under our budgeted appropriation levels. As I said, we take the budget pressures we have experienced recently very seriously, and we have exhausted all efforts to avoid any kind of staffing expansions of any serious extent in hiring of consultants for areas that I've challenged our folks to do on their own. We've also exceeded our revenue projections in each of those 2 years, particularly in the area of auto title and recording fees. Our change last year in how conveyances were assessed fees raised the revenue from that department approximately $2.5 million from 2016. In terms of our budget request, this request is fairly stable from an expense perspective. As I mentioned earlier, we've agreed to pursue consolidations that will save approximately $300,000 per year in salaries. The increases in our budget amounts relate strictly to salary and benefit increases, COLAs, changes in terms of benefit amounts, and as I said, the additional budgeted transfers that we have to appropriate from the title fund to the general fund. Our total budget request for all funds in 2018 is $32.7 million. It then drops to $30.8 million in 2019. Completion of the 2018 appraisal and lower payments for the real property system that's moving from a design stage to a maintenance stage once it becomes operational. that explains the lower appropriation request that we're asking in 2019. Our year-end projection for all funds for this year currently is roughly about $30.8 million. So we're right on target for that in terms of 2019 appropriations. We need the extra money in 18 for the transfer and for the end work that's associated with the property tax system and the appraisal. The general fund portion of our budget over the biennium is roughly $12.4 million per year. 2018 is a little bit higher than 2019 by approximately $200,000, but it averages out in terms of what the responsibility of the general fund is to $12.4 million a year. Related to the questions about the rental disclosure, that particular law that's in effect in the revised code has never been enforced in Cuyahoga County. Just so everybody knows, it's nothing new. It's on the back of every tax bill that goes out. So the property owners have the responsibility to comply with that. Our initial look at this particular process last year, with help of Shelley Davis from the Board of Revision and Brian O'Malley from the Recorder's Office, indicated that we had substantial noncompliance. There's a lot of reasons why this is going to be good, and that's what we communicated to the Mayors and Managers Association. Our records should be in compliance or match those of the local municipalities. A lot of the municipalities want to know who has rental properties because they assess a separate permit or fee associated with inspections and that sort of thing. So it behooves us to have matching databases that show the same thing. We've also been looking at an analysis of our owner-occupied property. As you know, you get an additional credit on your real estate taxes if you live in the property. We have found isolated instances where people are filing not only in the property that they live in, but the property that they rent out. So the only way to get our records up to date and to reduce that credit, which costs us and all the political subdivisions, is to have an accurate database of who's renting so that we know there's only one owner-occupied credit per property. So the same owner can't have primary residence and then have 2 or 3 rental locations and take the occupancy credit for each one of those. We have identified situations where that's occurred. We also have worked on reviewing that process with tax records in other states. There's been a big push in the state of Florida to identify which jurisdiction takes the credit because they have a bigger credit than us. So when they come back to Ohio and ask us if the property owner in Florida also gets it in Ohio, they will then rescind that from the state of Florida and impose some heavier fees. It's to move forward with this particular subject. It's compliant with state law. It's going to give us better data for the appraisal in terms of going out next year, in terms of what the property is really worth and what revenue is generated by that property to pass on to the city. From a city standpoint, it's also important because residential rental properties in the city will have to file with either RETA or CCA in terms of rental income. And we also, and I do know that from a finance director side in the cities, that a lot of income tax revenue is foregone because people do not file their rental income statements with the local taxing authorities. So this will help them identify those situations, and I'm sure the cities will take our registry and cross-reference that with RETA records and CCA records. Oh, I'm sorry. We'll have better records for you for what's actually in your district. As I said earlier, this code has never been enforced. The law was originally passed in 2006. It only applies to counties with a population in excess of $200,000. Franklin, Hamilton, and Summit already impose a fee if there's instances of noncompliance. Stark County has not, but similar to us, they are proposing to do so Lucas County does not impose any kind of fine. So for purposes of the budget, we did put a revenue projection in there because our estimates are we are going to have a certain percentage, given the size of what we estimate to be people not complying now, that we are going to have a fairly sizable amount of folks who do not file with our auditor's office to build a registry. So based on that and based on the amount of the fine, it can be $50 to $150 that would go on as a special assessment to the tax bill. We're projecting a certain amount of revenue associated with that. It is kind of like projecting speeding ticket revenue for a city. You would hope that nobody's going to get a speeding ticket in the city. But again, having done those kind of projections in 3 different municipalities, there is an amount of money that you know is going to come in because of the fact that people do speed. So we're merely associating a revenue projection with this based on the size of the population that we feel is not going to be compliant. If everybody's compliant, that's great. Everybody wins. We get an up-to-date registry. The information gets out to the cities and schools, and we will have to adjust our revenue projections. But to basically present the fact that we're going to have 100% compliance is probably not realistic. So I don't know if that summarizes that particular subject. I'd be happy to try and answer any questions you have or related to the budget in general.
Okay, Director, can you send us copies of your report?
Yes.
And to the administration generally, it helps if we have written copies of the presentation for the committee so that members can follow along, and it helps with preparing questions. So I would ask that for the remaining days of these hearings, if the presenters could please come to the meeting with hard copies of their reports, in addition to sending the electronic version to the clerk, so that we have those available for the members. And in terms of questions, we have Ms. Conwell, followed by Simon.
All right, thank you. Through the chair to Director Kennedy, what role will the prosecutor's office, if any, play in enforcing the system that you just talked about?
Councilwoman,
the county rental registry.
For the rental registry, the prosecutor's office would not be involved in that.
Okay. And have your department thought of any sanctions, and what would those sanctions be if we don't get the people to participate?
Councilwoman, the revised code provides for the assessment of a fine of not less than $50, not more than $150. Our proposed revenue that's associated with the implementation of this, based again on the size that we estimate to be non-compliant, was counted on at that $150 level. That goes on the next tax bill as a special assessment on the part of the county. So we would get that money directly then.
So if we have some of these individuals that have property that are already behind in taxes, and then they're being assessed this additional thing, how do you think, is that a lot? Is that a concern that we're worried about? Or
Councilman, there are 2 different things. The rental registry is not really indicative of the fact that somebody would be delinquent on their taxes.
Okay.
It's just
but you're going to put it on the tax bill. So
we would put a non-compliance, and again, this would be after a fairly exhaustive effort to educate everybody about this. We're not going to just boom, hit everybody over the head and start fining them. As I said, we made presentations to the mayors and managers. We've also, the folks in my operations staff have talked to every building department in the county. So we're going to try and make a very concerted effort to go out and educate people in the community that if your property fits this category, you have to register it with the county. But we're not expecting 100% compliance. But the assessment
so how do you enforce that?
Well,
so that's what I'm getting
at the end of, we'll give everybody a grace period to produce the correct filing with us. Subsequent to that, when the next tax bills go out, we would then levy whatever that assessed fee would be in terms of the fine for non-compliance with that revised code section. But it wouldn't necessarily be related on an individual basis to delinquent property owners, because these may be viable rental properties that are just not filing with us to notify us that they're rentals. And again, as I said, will help us clean up the database of owner-occupied properties, which is a pretty sizable reduction overall for the county in terms of that credit that people take. And again, we've identified situations where there is the same property owner taking more than one credit.
And that's one of my questions. So can you send us a list of how many cases that we're looking at that you found? Is it just a
Councilman,
few?
I could give you I give you some more detail. We have not done a one-for-one match in terms of those files. This would be another step in the process of doing that. And then we'll basically merge this registry with our property tax records. And then whatever comes out as a replicated entry, we'll follow up and investigate to make sure that somebody's not getting a credit they're not entitled to.
Last question, the $3 million was estimated for revenue in 2018, and so why the drop in 2019 of $500,000? What was the...
Councilwoman, based on some of the data we've looked at from other counties, we would anticipate that there would be a one-time kind of catch-up, and once people see that assessment come through on their bill, that they would be better suited to file in the future with us. We'll have better abilities to have folks at the local level go out and help. I mean, again, our goal is to make sure we have 100% compliance. That would be the best thing that we could have. But again, looking at the data in other counties, it's unrealistic to think that we're going to get 100% compliance with this. So hopefully after the first fine is assessed, the learning curve will kick in, and folks will not do that again in the future, and that's why we lowered that projection.
Okay, I'm still concerned about how you enforce a fine once we set rules, and then we have to have a good enforcement situation. But in terms of the homestead costs that you mentioned, this would, in hopes, would actually bring down some of those dollars that we're pitching in for the homestead for seniors over 60, or is that homeowners over 60?
Well, it's not so much a homestead, it's an owner-occupied credit.
Owner-occupied, okay. Thank you.
Okay, we have Ms. Simon followed by Brown and Tron.
Thank you. With regard to enforcing the registry, do you need more staff to do that?
Councilwoman, I don't believe so. I think we have a plan in place to do that. As I said, we're going to try and work very proactively with local building officials and with the mayors and city managers to get the word out. I don't think we're going to have a need right now for additional staff. I think we can accommodate it.
With regard to your staff overall, I know you've had some vacancies that have been outstanding and you need some help filling that. Or do you have enough in this budget to fill your needs? I mean, assuming you're going to bring in revenue from the tax penalties for failing to register rentals, you're going to have additional, hopefully, income. Could you use some of that to fill some of these vacancies and enhance your staff?
I think, Councilwoman, we're confident that the budget supplies all our needs for the biennium. We've been, as I mentioned earlier, we've been focusing on filling some of the current levels of vacancies. It takes a while to go out and find good folks. We just got a person in the beginning of the summer that's a financial reporting manager. We're still looking for a grants person. Some of those basic things there, but we're comfortable that moving forward with the ERP, that we'll have an ability to consolidate some of that. So I think right now we're good, and I think the budget stands as representative of what we need.
So I'm going to be checking in with your department just to make sure it's rolling how you think it's going to roll, to make sure that your staff too, because if you're going to be performing additional tasks and trying to get up to speed, then I think it's really important that you have your support staff there. In terms Yeah, in terms of this rental registry, that's on the books, that's been our law, and we just haven't been enforcing it. So how does this information help our appraisers going out? Would the amount of rentals on the street impact the property value next door or that particular property? I'm not really sure, and I don't want to get in the weeds on that, but just I heard you say that, and I've heard it before.
Councilwoman, it could impact it because there's a different perspective if something's considered a rental and how the upkeep is on that property versus a residential property. And I agree with you. The number of rentals in a certain area may impact the overall value that is associated with that small market district, and that's how they do the appraisals. It also gives us a more accurate database on when the appraisers go out as to who they need to contact to follow up questions. If you knock on the door and the person that answers the door says, I don't own this place, it makes their job a little tougher, especially due to the time constraints on having the ability to get additional information from the actual property owner. So it'll help in that regard too.
So I know that the city's building departments often have a housing department, to help determine their own local ordinance for registration of rentals.
Correct.
So they're already doing this, or should be doing this. How is the county going to help them get into their own communities to determine which properties are rental and should be registered?
Councilman, we have the way we dissect the records and record them in terms of the different codes that are associated with properties. We may be able to identify things that, from our perspective, are potential rental properties that the city has not identified on their own. So it will be a benefit to them. And again, if the more that we limit the owner occupancy credit to one individual property, that generates additional revenue for the cities and schools as well. So we hope to work together to have the most accurate set of data that we can, and I think everybody benefits by doing that.
And just one last question on the prosecutor's office going forward to collect delinquent property tax. And you said, is that, I think what you said, you're going to be working with the new prosecutor to change maybe some strategies. What do you think would be helpful to change in terms of collection efforts with our real estate delinquent taxes?
Councilman, we have had preliminary discussions with the prosecutor. What we're looking to do is to basically establish our own mechanism to go out and contact people. Number one, from an awareness standpoint, to tell people that maybe are one-time delinquents and who, for whatever reason, don't know the options that are available to them. Prosecutors offer to commit some resources in conjunction with our resources to help address that. If we can increase that awareness, we might also help some people in the long run. But then we also are coming up with a program where we can, in some respects, take the place of the collection agency. The collection agency fees, while they've been successful, they're pretty expensive. And we think through a combination collaborative effort with our resources, we can get same or similar results at a far cheaper cost.
I lied. One more question. So do you have, again, if you're going to be having your staff do more, it sounds like additional work at the outset of delinquency process, do you have enough resources to accommodate that shift?
I believe we do right now.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay, Ms. Brown.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I kind of want to pick up where Sunny started with regards to staffing levels. I've been seeing a little bit of a trend as I'm looking at some of the departments here. They actually budget for less FTEs in their estimates, and they are budgeting for more. The actual numbers are coming out to be higher, and that's not an uncommon thing that I've noticed. So can you speak to that, or how we can address that? Because I know as the HR chair too, we get classified positions, new positions that are being changed. Are we underestimating our staffing levels and then supplementing them at a later time just to meet our budget numbers? I'm not clear on what's happening here.
I'll do my best, Councilwoman. One thing to identify is that number that's represented in the budget are full-time equivalents, so it's not necessarily a one-for-one person. It may be temporary people that come and go during the year. If you have 4 temporary people that work 3 months apiece, that's 1 FTE. So that it changes the math a little bit. The history of the county, at least when I first got here, was that everybody budgeted every position that they had established for themselves and had asked for appropriation to maximize the number of people that could be acquired and put on board. Realistically, that doesn't happen. We went through some adjustments in the last budget to reduce the number of vacancies that we had budgeted for, simply because logistically people are coming and going all the time. There's gaps between positions that are open.
Director,
yes.
Time is moving. We need short answers. Thank you.
Anyways, that I think some of the budget contains everybody's representations about what they would like for that particular budget, in the hopes that they could get fully staffed during that period.
Okay, but to that one point, I guess we can discuss this offline. But what has happened is we're estimating for less and budgeting for more. And I guess when you speak to the fact that there's gaps and multiple people can be hired and equate to 1 FTE, might speak to that. But it would seem that your trends or historical data would put you in a position to be able to estimate that as well. So it still doesn't jive in my mind, but we can move on for the sake of time.
Okay.
Councilman Tran.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
By Jones and Baker.
Yes, Director Kennedy, I think you indicated that you're looking for around a $300,000 per year savings for 2018, 2019?
Related to the
ERP system.
position consolidations.
Right. Yeah. So in my simplistic mind, that's going to be 3 to 4 approximately on the head count, roughly?
Yeah, with benefits, yes.
Okay, yeah, fully burdened. So I'm just trying to get to 25 is where I'm going to go here ultimately. I'm not going to expect you, but that's 4 of our 25 that we were told we should see throughout the organization as a result of this. We also heard that we're not going to go live until June of 2018. And you're projecting $300,000 savings in 2018 as a result of the ERP system. So if it's not going to go live, do you have any concerns that your $300,000 will not be realized next year if the product doesn't even go live until halfway through the year?
Councilman, I think that $300,000 is still a viable estimate. We're going to look at the attrition rate throughout the year and try and identify situations where maybe not right out of the gate we would realize a savings from not hiring another person, but we're looking at each opening to see if we really need to fill it. And again, as I mentioned in the comments, that $300,000 is representative of both the ERP and the real property tax system.
Okay, so it won't be directly related to the ERP system being in place, doing its work at that point in time, because obviously it will not have gone live. The other thing we heard is that we will be fully implemented by 2019 by mid-year. Does that change your $300,000 for each year? Because that again is 18 months from now, more than 18 months from now before that goes live, fully implemented.
Councilman, no, I think our estimates were probably a little conservative, so I'm comfortable that those would still be valid.
Okay, that's fine. Thank you.
Councilman Jones.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Director Kennedy, my question revolves around the rental registration fee. Why is legislation not needed for you to be able to implement this?
Councilman, there's already existing language in the Ohio Revised Code that gives the county auditor, and in the case of Cuyahoga County, the fiscal officer, the ability to impose a fine if the renter does not file a registration with the county. So no separate legislation over and above state law would be required.
Okay, so that's a fee is different than a fine. Is there a difference between to two, and does that matter?
Yeah, just for clarification, Councilman, it's not a fee, it's a fine. So there's, if you file the appropriate paperwork, we're not charging $1 a page, or it's for instances where we make a determination in conjunction with our research and with reference to the individual city that we've identified somebody that should be filing. Then they will get a fine or a special assessment on their tax bill.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Ms. Baker.
Thank you. Registration is new to me, so what is the Ohio Revised Code number? I'm looking it up here. Is it the 5309 section?
323.131B.
3231.
323.131B.
Okay. Secondly, given I haven't read that, I'll just ask you a few questions about it. Does it specifically say that it is up to the county, or could it be up to the cities? Does it say it is a county obligation?
Councilwoman, I believe that it references language. It says it's the county auditor that has to maintain this file.
But is it the responsibility of the city to give that information to the county? Are we taking it upon ourselves to put this penalty on, or should it be done at the city and local level?
Councilwoman, I'm not an attorney, but in the times that I've read it, I believe it is strictly a county responsibility to maintain the registry.
Okay, I'll take a look at that. Secondly, why did we choose to go to the max of $150 and not the $50 if they're in penalty?
Good question.
Councilwoman, those estimates they gave on revenue were based on the 150. That's the max. I think we have plenty of opportunity before we get to that point to discuss whether we go to the bottom, the middle. But we needed to I wanted to put an accurate representation what the potential revenue would be. So that's the number we came to. I have not specifically identified that as a fixed cost in this whole project yet. We did make that reference to the mayors and managers when I spoke to them at the end of June. We obviously want to make sure that we're not doing something that's piggybacking on what renters' costs are for each city, but they did not raise any reservations with that proposed assessment.
The communication that you indicated, how much time are you going to give? How are you going to communicate? It's been since 2006, so that's been 10 years since we are saying we've been out of compliance. So how is that going to be communicated given the relative time that has passed?
Councilman, we have a segment of our operations staff working on that right now. As I said earlier, we can identify it by the type of code that the property is classified as, where we can narrow the field. So we're going to try and focus our energies on properties that we think or have reasonable belief are rental properties, as opposed to bombarding everybody with it. We'll try and change the word. As I said, it's been back on the back of every tax bill that goes out to taxpayers. We'll try and highlight that. We're going to look to try and get some community awareness at the local level in terms of sending people out to a council meeting, making use of whatever newsletters they have that they put out to their constituents. We'll try every avenue to get the word out that this program is now going to be enforced. And, any suggestions or anything that anybody has on top of that, we'd be happy to consider. Again, our goal is to make sure we have 100% compliance. But I thought it to be unreasonable to assume that we're going to do that the first time out, especially given the level that other counties have experienced when they kicked in this program. So that's why that revenue number was associated with that.
If I may continue. Given that we send out a tax bill to everyone, can't some notice be put in that tax bill, perhaps on its own alert piece of paper that says, please be advised the next time you are, give them that much time for those. So there is absolutely no, I didn't know that my city told me this, or I didn't read my newsletter, that if we are doing a direct mailing like that, that we could perhaps do it through that resource?
Councilwoman, we are looking at that option. One thing to consider, though, a lot of folks don't get their tax bill because it goes to a mortgage servicer, so they're never aware of an insert, the language on the back. So we're trying to come up with a mechanism or a plan that's going to address those folks, because we can identify what parcels get billed directly to a servicer. So we're going to try and focus more specific attention on those to get the information to the actual person who owns the property. So we will, in whatever cases we can, try and highlight that section on the bill and put in inserts and do whatever we can. We're also contemplating putting an upgrade notice on the appraisal notice that goes out next year, because everybody gets those. So right. The property owners. So right. We're working in a large case off the appraisal database as opposed to the tax bill database, because of the huge number of people that get their bills forwarded to somebody else.
And just to be clear, we're talking about every single office that's leased, every storefront that's leased, every house that is potentially leased, and all the turnovers that perhaps are done within a year, broken leases, all those types of things. That's a huge amount of
Councilwoman, there are certain restrictions on who this particular law applies to in terms of the size of the rental property. So I don't have all the details in front of me. I'd be happy to get those to you. But again, it's with the onus is on the property owner. If I have a house that I'm renting, really doesn't matter if I have somebody living in it today or somebody moved out and it's vacant. My responsibility is to notify the county that I'm renting this property. I don't live in it. That's really the basis of the law.
If that property is vacant and no one is living in it, but it is potentially rentable?
If it's classified as a rental, I believe then it would apply. And again, it's so that we're not paying redundant or giving people the opportunity to get redundant owner-occupied credits, because in a lot of cases, people will file with the county and get that exemption from their tax bill because they'll claim that they're living in not only their primary residence, but their rental property, and they'll say, well, it's vacant, which doesn't really apply.
So if a home is not, or a storefront is not renting, and we've had certainly storefronts, especially when we get it down in economy, that are just vacant, and they are struggling to fill those vacancies, whether it's a house, an office, or a retail space, and generally I think you're talking about small business, those, because they are classified as rentals, would pay their $150 for every unit that is empty. It does not have to be leased.
Councilwoman, the law only applies to residential rental properties, not commercial.
Time we talked, we were told it was for both.
I think there was some confusion as to lease recording and who would have to record a lease if that is the direction the county wanted to go in. This is strictly for residential rental.
I'm sorry, I didn't.
So storefronts would not apply.
I didn't understand that. One last question. Did you talk to the, I know you talked to the mayors and managers, and of course this is a revenue stream, so I would think they would be likely to be encouraged by it. But what about the realtor associations, the business people that are out there that, buy and sell and understand rentals, and the impact perhaps in their community of wanting those to buy perhaps older homes, renovate them, and then lease them? Is there any impact that you've heard from them that they think $150 would be a lot for them to pay versus the minimum of $50?
Councilwoman, I do believe that we have made contact. I don't have the details with me. I'd be happy to get back to you on that, but and I'm not sure the answer to your question specifically. I don't know if there was any discussion about the amount and its impact, but I'd be happy to look into that.
All right, I appreciate it. Thank you.
Okay.
Mr. Chairman, if I just may quickly just clarify the record, Councilwoman, the Ohio Revised Code section is 5323.99. 5323.99.
Perfect. Thank you.
Director, do rental agents have to file every year or only when there's a status change?
I believe, Mr. Chairman, it's only when there's a status change. But
And Director, to use Councilman Schwan's favorite phrase, could you give me a Kentucky windage estimation on what percentage of people are in compliance with it now and what we do with the current registry information?
I believe the current compliance is estimated to be roughly 55 to 60%. We're expecting that even when we expand all these efforts to communicate, that we would be satisfied with a compliance rate of like 80 to 82%, leaving 18 to 20% non-compliant.
And Director, what use do we make of the registry now?
It's used, Mr. Chairman, for very small functions. Like I said, we're starting to compare it to the owner occupancy credit files, but right now it's not really used by anybody.
So we haven't been doing these things that you're saying we're going to do?
We have not, no, sir.
We have not, okay. Okay, thank you very much. Oh, wait, I'm sorry. Councilman Jones, I apologize.
Thank you. Director Kennedy, what about in the context of banks who own property? If their property is vacant, does the registration, is it required even if the renter is, if the property is vacant, but it's a rentable property, but there's just no one present? Does it apply in that case?
Councilman, off the top of my head, I'd probably say no, because the bank owns the mortgage, so they own the house. It would only be if they plan to rent that house out, then I would assume they would be required to file.
Okay.
But if they don't, and it's residential properties only.
So there has to be a tenant in the home for it to qualify for, or for, it has to be a tenant in the home.
Councilman,
I'll give you time on that. You don't have to.
I think the intent has to be to have it used as a rental property, which you have to file with the city as well to make sure that you have their permits in line correctly and their inspections and that sort of thing.
Okay. So as I think about it, you know, our mayors, our cities are having the biggest challenges with these type of properties. And just off the top of my head, I'm thinking if this has any way of playing a part in helping that in any way. It's just brainstorming now.
Councilman, it would identify for them properties that are potential rentals that they may not be aware of. It will also give them a more exhaustive database of people that they can check with their income tax collection agency to make sure that folks are filing for any profits that they made on their rental operations. You know, if they don't know about it and the person doesn't file, they'll miss the income tax part of that. And if we do find circumstances where somebody in your city or district is taking a duplicate owner occupancy credit, the credit will be revoked and everybody that collects taxes will get that credit instead of it going to the taxpayer.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
I'm going to go a little bit out of order. I see that we also have Director Rourke to speak on the innovation and performance. So I'm going to call him forward so we can make sure to finish with him today. I'm not sure we're going to finish everybody today because there are a lot of questions. So, Director, please present on the innovation and performance.
Good afternoon. Thank you. For the 2018 and 2019 Office of Innovation and Performance biennial budget, we're proposing a budget of $1.1 million, down from $1.2 million. The staffing levels right now are budgeted at 6, and we're suggesting a reduction to 5 individuals with the elimination of the vacant position of Director of Strategic Projects. The key initiatives for this biennial are 1, cost savings, You've heard references before. We have formed a strategic sourcing buying group. Collectively, it's the 4 largest buying agencies, IT being one, Public Works, Health and Human Services, and others. We've committed to $1 million of savings using innovative purchasing techniques like strategic sourcing. You may have heard we're working on an innovative approach called reverse auctions, which is in our first trials recently have proven to be pretty successful. So we're excited about those. The other piece is the strategic plan. You probably have seen this. We have spent a wealth of time with all the leadership teams, with the directors, with the employees, solicited a lot of feedback, developing the goals, starting with the mission and the vision, the strategic priorities, which you've probably seen, and then really focusing all the way down to a project level to make sure we're all focusing on the same priorities, aligning priorities, and building the commitment and capacity to execute against those priorities and those projects. The third piece is the performance management. So we are also developed a performance management system. So we are tracking measures. There's a little over 70 measures against those plans. So we will have, much like the old county stat days, we will have dashboards. We will be tracking measures. Some are community indicators. Some are departmental operational oriented, and some are project oriented. But performance management is an important part of it. And then lastly, fostering a culture of innovation. You may have heard we've been working on projects like Lean, working on change management and project management. So those are all the key areas for this biennial budget that we'll be able to complete. I mentioned we've got the one budget reduction proposed. Again, one position with a reduction of about $100,000, getting this down to about 8% for the biennial. And then lastly, I'm pleased to say that from a Chief Innovation Officer, we've been doing a national search to find an expert in with very ambitious goals as it relates to what we were hoping and aspiring to get. We were able to recently get a commitment from an expert in government innovation. Her name is Catherine. She's coming to us. She's got 10 years of experience. She most of which in the San Antonio Innovation Office. There she's done things like Lean, which I mentioned, project management, Six Sigma. She's done a variety of innovations. She's worked in courts, early childhood, pre-K, some fascinating experience building an innovation office from scratch to, I believe they've now, in that period of time, achieved about $20 million in hard cost savings in their innovation office, which we hope to emulate. So her start date is November 27th. We've shared with council staff Joseph Nani plans and a draft ordinance to move from an office to a department. And of course, we're working on times on a confirmation here and working with council. So very exciting times, a very talented individual. We're excited to have him on board. With that, I will open it to questions, please.
Director, you projected $250,000 in cost savings for 2017. Where are those being achieved?
I'm sorry, which 250 are you referencing?
The budget book projected $250,000 in cost savings for 2017. I'm wondering where those are being achieved.
For 2017?
Right.
For 2017, we've already done this fourth quarter. We are doing, I mentioned those reverse auctions. So we have over $1 million of accumulated spend. We just finished a project with the jails. We have over $1 million of purchasing with IT, and those forecasts, we've already realized some of those benefits out of the jail piece, and IT, which is wrapping up right now, will also contribute to that. The strategic sourcing project.
Questions by my colleagues. Councilwoman Brown, followed by Simon.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The department's been up for 2 years, so I just wanted to get some clarity as to what type of return on investment we can physically see for the $1.1 million.
As you may know, roughly half the positions have been empty, so the Director of Strategic Projects has been vacant. The Chief Innovation Officer has been vacant for roughly a year. So what we've been hoping to do is attract somebody from with this national search using a search assistant and have them be the coach and kind of build the team and do the project. So we mostly have been holding back on the expenditures. We've been focusing on aligning to the strategic plan. So we've been engaging in the development of this, aligning everybody else's priorities, hoping we would get the coach that would build their team and implement the respective projects.
So none. Is that your answer?
From a return?
Yeah.
Oh, well, they're leading the purchasing project, which we mentioned, which we think will be about $250,000 this quarter and $1 million next year. In innovation, we did a real estate project where we did a project to document all our real estate holdings, develop a strategy, and in future years in public works, we're hoping we've got some opportunities to save several $1 million, including several $100,000 of operating costs. So the purchasing, the real estate, and then the rest has been aligning the plan, the strategic plan and priorities, and we're confident that this new leader who has experience saving about $20 million over the last 5 to 10 years will bring in the expertise, the capacity to generate a good return for us, much like they've enjoyed in San Antonio.
Just so I'm clear, for the last 2 years, we've been hoping and waiting to get a person that can potentially save us $20 million when they get on board for the $1.1 million we've invested. Is that what you're saying?
I'm saying that I expect when the department is staffed that we will get a return on investment that will exceed $1 million a year.
Ms. Simon.
Thank you. So with the financing and budgeting for Lean Six Sigma training and the infusion of $1 million, we haven't seen any realization of cost savings to date. What I'm hearing is that this will come somewhere down the line?
Yeah, from cost savings is one of those initiatives. So the purchasing transformation project was a byproduct of the Lean initiative.
What is that?
So the purchasing transformation project is we convened most of the departments under the executive office. We trained them on process mapping and a variety of Lean techniques. They made recommendations, and then we used new technologies to automate and streamline the purchasing system. So over the last couple of months, purchasing, which in 2016, the average purchasing time was over 200 days. Newly, just in the last couple of months in purchasing, this innovation project was able to bring the average purchase order down to just 21 days from beginning to end, and RFPs take about 6 weeks now. So a huge efficiency gain. We think it will lead to hard cost savings, but right now we're focusing on improving the purchasing process.
Okay, and what about the real estate project? What's that?
The real estate project is we engage a real estate company called Allegro. They had previously done a real estate study years ago. They refreshed the study on what our leases are, what properties we own, and they made recommendations on strategies on which ones should we maybe invest in, which ones should we hold, which ones should we divest. So
okay, wait, I'm sorry to interrupt you. We did that already. We just did a study a couple years ago under the past executive where we put substantial money into coming up with that inventory and a plan on how to proceed with our investment portfolio. So why would we do that again? And how much did that cost? I'm sorry.
I haven't looked at it recently. I want to say it was 85. Do you know? From memory, I haven't looked in a while. I believe it was $85,000 to refresh that study, do interviews, revalidate. The study was over 5 years old, I believe, and then make recommendations, and we've identified several $1 million of new opportunities.
Did we go out to bid for the Allegro contract?
I believe there were multiple phases to it. I believe they refreshed the study, and we bid it, and then the project was implemented. Allegro did win it and did do the subsequent phase.
So how are we saving money with that? I mean, this is one of your examples of how the investment of $1 million is realizing savings from this real estate project.
They identified some opportunities where there are properties. Director Dever can certainly tell you more, but they identified 2 properties that they thought were ripe opportunities for us for disposition strategies where we could relocate employees, create a couple $1 million of return for the county, and reduce operating expenses.
So is that, I want to see this as if it's different from that which we already had before us. I want to be sure that this is just not a reiteration of that we already have in front of us. It's not that complicated. It's, a third recommended we sell, and there was we had all this. And yes. I'm curious why we would expend additional dollars within this period to make the same determination. And staff, I want to do an analysis on this. So I'm just don't understand why we would consider that a savings when we already went through this process. Not much has changed with our portfolio. Okay, 2 more questions. So you had originally proposed cost savings initiative involved with the non-competitive billing, if you remember, of Ernst & Young, and council asked that this go to bid. However, what's come of that? Because you indicated there'd be considerable savings with that contract, and then it just sort of died on the vine. And I know that I personally was unhappy that it did not go to bid, but why didn't you go forward to send it out to bid if it was going to yield such great savings?
That was a efficiency study initiative. It was originally a variety of different RFQs that were done by the Chief Innovation Officer, Darrow Mott. We did have discussions about how to proceed, and yourself included, and the council, and we got some great feedback. And what we elected to do is, with the ERP solving many of the efficiency opportunities that were identified, with internal staff, we actually took some of the richest targets, which were a recommendation of Darrow's Ernst & Young study that they did. We were able to, with staff instead, per your recommendation, address some of those issues, which turned into our purchasing transformation project that reduced the cycle times, and now we've committed to save $1 million next year.
Okay, good. I mean, so when you came before council with the E&Y rep, she was very dogmatic about why this would be such a cost savings, and we were going to be spending money up front. There was some upfront money that we would have had to spend as a county on this contract. So if it weren't for this council digging deep, we would have ended up spending a good chunk of money on that contract. How much? 800?
I believe it was 375 up front, well, with 5 times return, and then there was some revenue sharing at the end.
Okay. And I have another one, but I'll come back. We had intervened on this because it was so it made little sense to us, and especially to me, and I'm just disappointed that this was a sales pitch to us where we would have ended up costing money when now you're finding these savings internally, which is why we are financing this department to begin with. I mean, we really are looking to you and your department to find these savings, not to contract out, not to go to these third parties. So we're going to be looking hard at what's going on there. And the money we've put in, to have a real estate portfolio project come back to us when we already did that. I just want to let you know that I'm going to be watching what's happening in this department because of what we potentially would have had to spend and unnecessarily. And I will ask my last question. I'll be done. What's the average salary for your department?
The 2 of the 3 individuals are about $90,000, and the junior resource, off memory, is about $65,000, I believe.
Are those the top 90?
Those are the only 3 roles we have filled right now. Yes.
Okay. Plus you.
I'm actually funded out of the Department of IT.
Oh. Okay. Okay. Thanks.
Anything else for innovation, Ms. Baker?
I guess, could you give some clarity to the difference between what the Office of Innovation and Performance is to the enterprise resource planning? It just seems that much of what you're saying is blended into that. In fact, you say the long-planned efforts to contract out an efficiency study was ultimately withdrawn and replaced by efforts associated with the ERP. So it seems very blended. How do you differentiate between all that we're doing with the ERP and that personnel and all the strategic planning and everything that is more than just IT with what you're doing as a Office of Innovation?
Yeah, the Office of Innovation, as I mentioned, is about the strategic planning. So they've actually written strategic plans for organizations or supported the writing of strategic initiatives outside of the ERP. So, for example, they worked diligently on supporting the HHS strategic plan. the sustainability strategic plan, the public works strategic plan, which is largely devoid of references to ERP. So the ERP is really about the automation of processes, the bringing integrated data to prompt good decision making, and being responsive to customer needs. And so there's certainly opportunities. I see innovation as being more dedicated capacity to prompt change in a big project that's high return.
If I just may follow up. So the sustainability, it says here, strategic plans for sustainability, public works, and Department of Health and Human Services. Those departments with their directors and their employees could not function without the Office of Innovation participating?
We supported those plans. So sometimes it's we've got templates, we've got project plans, we've got folks that are experienced in it. So the role varies depending on department, but we did provide significant resource and support to go through the process. We also are trying to do a more common process so that the plans all are tied together and are common and consistent.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, anything else? Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Next we have Director Murray, Treasurer.
Good afternoon, Chris Murray. Good afternoon, Chairman Miller and members of council. I'm here to present the 2018 budget for the Treasury. If the committee will indulge me, I just have a couple of highlights or points that I want to make before we dive into the budget.
Please do that briefly.
Very briefly.
The hour
yes.
is late.
Well,
incredibly
it's like
briefly.
15 from the back.
Just as an FYI, the tax year 2016, we actually collected $2.2 billion. That would have been the collection that ended July 18th. In terms of investment earnings, I'm happy to report to council that we are projecting $10 million in 2017, which you no doubt see in your budget projections, which is an increase over what we originally budgeted this year, which I believe was $8.5 million. So the market is doing very well, and the investments that we are able to look at now, more emphasis on commercial paper and agency investments that are in the 3 to 5 year range. We are seeing very good returns. Also, the interest rate increase helps as well. In terms of an update on the tax lien certificate sale, that will be November 24th, with a deadline for taxpayers to make payment arrangements November 22nd. We're looking at approximately 3,500 parcels in the portfolio at this moment, and then all of our partners have, of course, had a chance to look at the portfolio. That would be our municipalities, our development corporations, and of course the county land bank. In terms of delinquencies, we now stand at a total of 42,000 parcels. Now that's out of 500,000 parcels in total, which averages out about 8% of our total parcels are delinquent, which is pretty consistent, at least for the 3 years that I've been treasurer. In terms of foreclosure update, and these are the parcels that we're working with the county prosecutor on most closely. We have sent 4,600 parcels to the prosecutor's office, and they've been parcels that are approximately 2 to 4 years old. Just a quick breakdown of those parcels: 1,300 of them have been for the hardest hit funds, 1,400 have been for judicial foreclosures. We also did a special foreclosure effort in late January for parcels that were not selected by the tax lien purchaser last year. That was another 850. Another 828 commercial foreclosures were sent, and then another 269 partner requests throughout the year. and that would be anything from a city council member perhaps sending over a nuisance property, or could be land bank, or it could be development corporation for any type of development project that is on the drawing board. In terms of the budget, the very small budget of the county treasurer, it's $12.6 million and approximately 45 FTEs. Only $3.2 million, which constitutes about 25%, is actually supported by the general fund. 1.7 is funded by the delinquent tax collections, and another $7 million is actually earmarked for land bank operations. In terms of staffing, I have eliminated one vacancy, and I am requesting another customer service rep to help with our phone coverage and walk-in traffic. And in terms of, I forgot one other highlight. In terms of our community outreach, as you know, we have staff that are in the community talking about our tax collection programs and services that are offered. And we just recently made a presentation to the First Suburbs Consortium to talk about their 2016 delinquencies, and we're working on some strategies to help them help us. So with that, I'm open for questions.
Okay. Who has questions for Treasurer's Office? Okay.
One quick one through the chair to the director. You stated 1.7 to pay the employees came out of the delinquent tax fund. What was the number for the general fund?
The general fund is $3.2 million. It's about 19 staff plus we've got a couple of service contracts for Bloomberg, Armor Car Services, and our investment advisor.
Thank you.
Councilman Sean.
Thank you. Yes, Treasurer Murray, the efficiencies and effectiveness of the new ERP system, how has that impacted or will impact your department?
At this point, the interplay with ERP is centered around just our investment staff, and right now that's a staff of 4. Based on what I've been able to observe, and in conversations with the consultants, what we will see is some efficiencies in terms of when we can complete our work during the day. But at this point, it doesn't look like it's going to eliminate activities. It will make us faster, but in terms of elimination of activities, that I haven't seen yet.
Okay, so the only place you're going to be touching the ERP is on the investment side? You're not going to be touching it on anything else that you just went through?
In phase 1, which is finance, it will only be the investment side. Phase 2 would be that'll be more of a global impact, because that'll be when we get into HR activities.
And when do you anticipate that will be in relationship to the Treasury Department?
Phase 2 is already underway. I'm gonna have to ask Douglas to help me as to when phase 2 will be completed. Phase 1, which is what we're primarily involved in, we're expecting to be online in June. Okay,
and then everything goes live by mid-19, right?
That's what we've got right now, yes.
And what impact will that have on you by mid-2019?
Again, it will be, because of what we do in terms of cash management. I still have reconciliation activities that need to be done by a person. It will help us certainly bring files in and help us to analyze quicker. In terms of if you're looking at primarily staffing resources, I can't tell you yet if I'm going to go from 4 to 3 or 4 to 2. I'm at 4
You anticipated
right
my next question, which was that we have a commitment that your department and all the folks who are taking that microphone are going to be where we're going to see the 25 reduction to offset the 25 increase.
I understand what you're saying. In terms of operating efficiencies, I can't make that statement yet. I would prefer to see my operations in the new environment. Okay. All I can tell you right now is what we've been doing for 50
If you can't
years.
make it yet for your department, then somebody can't rely on it because you haven't made it yet in their number count. Thank you.
Okay. Yes, Ms. Baker.
You said there was one vacancy?
There is one vacancy at this point, which I'm eliminating, and we're reassigning duties.
So if there's one vacancy?
In the general fund. Sorry, Councilman. In the general fund.
So when you say there's no proposed budget reductions to the Treasury Department, and you have one vacancy you're not filling, there's not an impact there?
The duties of this particular position have been absorbed with existing staff.
So there will be savings, or?
There's not, there will be a savings in the general fund for this position, but I also made the statement that I will be requesting a additional customer service rep, but the customer service rep is actually paid by the delinquent tax collections, which is not general fund. So it's a wash for the total operation.
Okay.
But in terms of general fund, it is a savings.
Okay, thank you.
I would give the director some credit for that. Okay, anything else? No. Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you.
And next we have Department of Human Resources, Director Dykes.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
So because of time, I'm going to try to make this really, really short. So I'll skip a couple of highlights here. But human resources, we have an overall budget that includes 4 separate funds: the general fund, hospitalization self-insurance fund, our workers' compensation, and health and human services rather. The overall budget for 2018, we estimate to be about a little over 148 million, which represents around a 2% increase over the 2017 budget estimates. And 2019 represents a 4.23% increase over the 2018 budget estimates. The only significant growth in 2018 is really in the wellness program. We're asking for an additional $500,000 to make good on our employees that participated in 2017 wellness initiatives. The next largest fund actually is the regionalized program, self-insurance program, which is around $38 million, which 18.8 million dollars, which is really for the Board of Development and Disabilities. So, and again, I'm trying to condense this because I know we're running out of time. I'm sure there'll be questions. Let me try to answer the question I think I'm going to get for the ERP. So,
you're at least paying attention to where the direction is going.
So we don't have identified position reductions in the 2018 or 2019 budget, but I will tell you that we will be reducing some positions as a result of attrition. We have right now one position in our benefits area that we did not refill once the person retired as a result of anticipating the ERP implementation. We have a position in our payroll, which was a payroll administrator, which was a higher salary, that person retired, and we did not fill that position and will not fill that position as a result of the implementation of the ERP. So we will see some savings with the ERP. I think another significant point so far as savings or shifting costs rather, is that we have increased the employee participation when it comes to healthcare. I was at one of these meetings, or a meeting, I think it was earlier this year, and we talked about the percentage of healthcare that our employees pay compared to what the market is. And so we have negotiated with our 2 largest unions, which we will be increasing that employee cost share over the next 2 years, and also our non-union people, and then any other negotiations that we're able to complete by the end of the year that will also be effective for them. So I'll stop there. If you have any questions, we'll help you to answer them.
Well, Miss Brown, your area, any questions?
Because we've been meeting quite regularly, I will yield to my colleagues. So no, I don't have any questions. Thank you, Mr. Dykes, and thank you, Mr. Chair.
Who has questions for Human Resources? Okay.
Okay, so now you've committed that you're going to have one less person through attrition as a result of efficiency and effectiveness of what we're going to be spending $25 million on. What is that efficiency you're gaining? Tell me what it is you're going to get as a result of it. What's their job going to look like as a result of this, and why it's so an improvement of what you're doing that you can afford to live without one person?
So our current process, so let me just look at payroll first. Our current process in payroll is very manual. And we check and double check and check and double check. And we have various systems that we put payroll and employee information in. We have two separate systems, and they don't talk to each other. So once we have a system that talks, it's one system, we will be able to eliminate a lot of the manual processes, including we have very complicated union contracts. And because of the age of our current payroll system, we're not able to really program those contracts into the system. And as a result of that, we still do a lot of stuff manually. Well, with N4, with implementation of N4, we will be able to put those contracts as they are stated in the system, which would automate them, and we won't need as many people in that. And it's the same thing with benefits. Right now, I mean, my benefit staff are doing open enrollment, I'm sure you're aware. And I mean, they probably have spent, 60 to 70 hours the last couple of weeks, almost all of them, trying to get the system to program changes. Some of them we were successful, but others we are going to have to still manually put those in. This new system will allow us to automate all of those, put those in the system where we won't need as many. And that's why I didn't fill the benefits job, and that's why I didn't fill the payroll job.
So it's two positions you're saying?
Those are two positions, yes.
I thought I only heard one. So that goes live when for benefits and for payroll?
The estimated go live date for benefits was mid 2019, I believe, and for payroll was the end of 2019. But I believe there may be some switching around of that, and HR may be able to go a little bit quicker, which would be a tremendous benefit for me, especially when it comes to open enrollment.
So these vacancies are not going to show up, and you're certainly not going to eliminate the dual manual system until you can actually go live, which is, you say, the end of 2019?
Yeah, probably for right now, for where it stands, the end of 2019. Yes.
I thought I heard from the director that we're going to be going live with HR by next summer.
Let's just say,
I thought that's what maybe I missed it, but
let's just say I'm not sure that we're 100% on time with delivery, and I'm not going to say we're going to go next summer, but that's what we are shooting for at first.
Who's going to be the gatekeeper on going live on something as critical as benefits and HR? Will that be ERP directors, or will that be you as HR?
That's going to be me.
Okay.
Because I know how the benefits and I know how the payroll should be set up. And I'll be working with the ERP team, but I'm being held accountable for that.
Okay, and you indicated it's very complicated based on the number of contracts and union contracts we have. Who is actually walking through all the mechanical pieces to making sure it's programmed correctly?
That will be myself and my Director of Human Resources, Labor and Employee Relations, Ed.
Okay, and when did you get brought in to that level of detail? You heard from Mr. Kennedy that it was beginning of this month on the fiscal issues as far as cash and accrual. When did you get brought in to make sure that these are being programmed with all the details of the contracts?
Well, I think what's missing is that the actual programming has not taken place yet. And so we have looked at the current state, and we've looked at best practices, but we haven't begun the program yet. And so the answer to that question is I'll be on the front end of that, but we haven't been able to program the system for HR yet.
Okay, so the details as to what these contracts look like has not started to move over into anything of an operational nature.
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
Anything else? Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Department of Human Resources, Healthcare Benefits, Ms. Woods.
Good afternoon. Holly Woods, Director of HR for Benefits and Compensation. And just to add, as we're talking about cost efficiencies with the ERP, going back to our payroll staff, an additional piece that we'll realize there is right now with our current system, staff has to work overtime regularly, coming in on weekends, staying late and early in the morning in order to meet payroll deadlines because of some of the significant limitations. With the automation that the ERP will provide, in addition to the systems being able to talk to each other, I would anticipate some significant decreases in that overtime expense as well. So I just want to focus on, I'll break it into 3 areas that you'll be seeing some adjustments in the benefits area. They are a change in our healthcare providers, the regional partner program, as well as the wellness program. So first one for the regional or the healthcare providers, recently engaged in a request for proposal process, reevaluating our major medical providers, prescription, stop loss, flexible spending, and our employee assistance program. Gave us an opportunity to review those proposals with some cost inefficiencies and cost increases in our UHC program, in addition to Medical Mutual now covering all university hospital systems. We did decide to eliminate that United Healthcare plan effective January 1st, 2018. So we are down to 2 medical providers, Metro Health and Medical Mutual. And as a result of us decreasing the medical providers, we will realize some cost efficiencies there and some claims avoidance as we look at the claims and how things are processed, and simply just the rates that we were going to be charged as they were being increased by United Healthcare. The second area is changes to the regional program. So as you are aware, we engaged in a new process coming into 2017 for our regional partners. And we ended up reducing our regional partners down to 10, which we have 10 partners today from 20 previously. We are engaging in renewals right now. Our renewals range from 6.5% to 19.3%. Our regional partners have until November 1st to let us know if they're going to remain in the program. We have 5 partners so far that have indicated already that they are staying in the regional program. I'm happy to announce that regional pool has stabilized with everything that we put in place coming into 2017. The rates that we've set and where we are has caused some stabilization in the plan. So the future is to look at expanding that regional program with a goal of having additional regional partners as we moved into 2019. And the third area to touch upon, as Douglas mentioned, is the wellness program. So the re-implementation of the wellness program in 2017. I'm happy to report that at the conclusion of year 1, we had 2,347 employees participating in the program. That's a little over 34%. Trend shows that anywhere between around 20% is good for year 1. So the participation level was good for year 1. In addition, we have a 986 that totally completed the program, which we will be offering a reimbursement for their participation in that program. And we did start the new program year 2, starting in just September 1st. And right now we have 883 employees participating in that program today. That's all I have. If you have any questions.
Through the chair to director, payroll deadline. What has been the cost for overtime that you stated, and how long has it been going on?
I don't have that information available, but I'm sure we can give you some numbers on overtime worked and the cost to HR.
Okay, so it's been going over several budgets cycles, or since you've been here, or is this something recently new?
I don't believe it's anything new. I believe this has been a past practice. Again, just because the timing of the systems when they have to have payroll in and how that information gets to pay out, I believe it's been going on for quite some time.
And just number 2 is just something that you can send to the council. The list of the current regional partners, you said it was 10?
Correct.
Thank you.
Ms. Simon?
Thank you to Ms. Woods. With regard to the regional health care benefit program, that's down a lot from 20 to 10. And that pool was always stable, but now you said it's stabilized. I guess there was some anticipation of costs outweighing what the revenue was. So that's what you mean by stabilization now. There's been a neutralization of cost and anticipated payout, right?
That's correct. There were some deficits in the rates and how things were being charged, and so it is stabilized and we're building that reserve fund.
So I had a community inquire into getting into the pool or remaining in the pool, and they did a check in the private sector, and the private sector rates were significantly lower than our county rate. And are you finding that feedback from the regional partners?
So I would anticipate that private would be a little bit different than public. In addition, often under a program like this, if you're going out for a quote for rates, you're going to get a lower quote in year 1 until the organization or the healthcare provider sees your trend, sees your actual the claims coming in. And so I'm not surprised to hear that they would get a lower quote, but I would challenge that in future years after they join a new provider that they most likely would not maintain those low rates.
Are you anticipating that the rate to the communities will remain somewhat within the range it's in now, or do you see an exponential jump? How do communities assess whether it makes sense to stay in the county pool if they'll be paying more now?
Sure. So one of the things, one of the major items that goes into their rates is their loss ratio. So looking at it, our program is a self-funded program, and it's the utilization of that program which probably makes up the largest part of their rates. So how many people they have covered by their plan, the chronic conditions they suffer from, the catastrophic claims that are coming in. That's probably the largest factor of what goes into determining the rates. I do anticipate it to stay relatively the same, but again, you're also asking about the health of a population. And if the regional partners aren't helping employees manage the health of their population, they will see spikes and possibly even declines.
And lastly, if a community were to leave, could they come back? Would that destabilize your pool? If communities, huge reduction with 10, what happens if 2 more leave? Is that going to hurt the remaining members?
So one of the benefits of the regional program is the purchasing power that the county has. So while our regional partners in and of themselves, if 1 or 2 more left, it's not a significant number because they're still harnessing the purchasing power of the entire county. But we are beginning the process of identifying all the criteria for entry to the new program, in addition to defining if somebody wanted to come back, what would that look like? So more to come on that. Our goal is really to make sure that we're stabilized before we determine what this new path will look like for either new entrants or re-entrants.
Councilman Tron.
Thank you. I remember a few years ago we did have some real concerns about the way this whole program or regional plan was working, and I thought you indicated that we had 5 that have stayed, not 10. 5 committed to stay at this point?
So at this point, this is for the renewals.
Right.
So 5 have committed to renew for 18. We haven't heard from the other 5 yet.
Okay, so we only have, at this point in time, we only have 5 of the 20 that are still on board.
10 today are enrolled in the program. For 8, we only have, for 2018, we have 5 confirmed that they're remaining.
Right, okay, so I just want to make sure that we've only heard from 5. The other 5, the best we could hope for is 10.
Correct.
That's the best.
Correct.
So we have seen a loss of half of our business. And I know you alluded to perhaps that the people are leaving because somebody got aggressive on their pricing. Well, guess what? It sounds to me as though we were aggressive on our pricing for a long time, and we're not actuarially sound, is what we heard.
So part of that, and I think this is something it's probably time for another presentation on this, because when we first approached coming into 2017, we were focusing on stabilizing our rates. Historically, all the regional partners got the same rate renewal. So whether they were having a good year and managing healthcare or not, they were all getting the same rate, thus overcharging some entities that should have been paying less, and overcharging or undercharging some that should have been paying more. So to truly have a good structure for this program, we wanted to make sure that each entity was being charged the rates based on their individual population. So in addition, prior to coming into 17, there were some misprojections in what those rates should be, resulting in some underfunding of the program, which is again why we're working on building a reserve. So I believe at this point it has stabilized. There were some partners who I would say should have paid more in previous years that didn't, and they left the program because they saw an increase. But I wouldn't be surprised if after moving to another provider, after their first year, they would see double and even triple increases as well.
So we're concerned that somebody might be doing the exact same thing we did, which was to underprice the product. We brought on, there was a lot of us who were very concerned about the way we priced this product and what we did to people to bring them on board. And now we're finding out that any business that loses 50% of its business ought to really look and see whether or not whether we got the right model. And how about, because it's a self-funded model, we've got a stop loss someplace along the way in there. What's our stop loss carrier telling us about what's going on? Because that's usually another red flag that we are out of line.
So, and I think to your point is that as we brought in our new healthcare consultant and we reevaluated the program, we did believe some significant adjustments were made. And as we came to council at that time, we needed to make a big change to set it up correctly. And we did anticipate regional partners leaving, but we felt that this program was a solid program and we wanted it to continue and we wanted it to grow. So I do agree that there were some missteps in the past, but I think that we are right set currently. It's a solid plan. I think this will grow exponentially. As far as your stop loss question, again, you have some of our carriers that have some significant catastrophic claims. So, you know, as far as if we're out of line with where we are with stop loss, there's no concerns with where
no, it's not a question of the concern about whether stop loss is going to kick in. It's the price got moved on up. This body decided that the educational system program of scholarships, we were going to get out of that. If we've gone from 20 to 10 to really only 5 renewals, should we be looking at whether we should be in the insurance business or whether we should just buy an insured product? I mean, self-funding is an interesting thing to go out there, but perhaps we should really re-examine. Who are the 5 communities that have committed right now? Because it's within our districts up here.
Sure. So we have the Board of Developmental Disabilities, Board of Health, Highland Hills, Land Bank, and Mayfield Village.
So we have 2 communities. The other 3 are really, for all intents and purposes, have a connection with the county.
That is correct.
So,
and when I do want to respond to is the idea of us being in the business of providing them insurance. Again, it's really just assisting them in the purchasing power of the plan. So the benefit to the county is assisting your smaller communities in getting a better price if it's available. That's the benefit. It's creating an opportunity for all these municipalities to grab onto the purchasing power and assist them.
I know, but if it was that good, we have 59 communities and we have 2, you're telling me.
Correct, but I think that's a result of the changes we made. And again, it's a time for rebuilding. I think that it's a good opportunity to reevaluate this in another 2 years, look at how it expands, look at where the rates stabilize. But we did know that we were making some significant changes, and it was completely appropriate for some entities to go out and say, can I get a better deal somewhere else? We expected that, but we also believe that the program is good, it's stable, and it will continue to pay off for any other municipalities that join in the future.
Yeah, my concern is that in 2 years from now, the 2019, you can't budget for this program. We have to actually basically take on the risk, and the risk is unknown at this point in time because we're self-funding. Thank you.
I do think when we get the reserves up to the level that we want, we might be able to be a little bit more competitive because we wouldn't have to add further to reserves. Is that correct?
That is correct. Once we have that reserve rebuilt, the currently part of the rates is funding that reserve. You're correct.
Okay, thank you. Okay, thank you very much. And Rebecca, I think we've pushed it as far as we can push it.
She's here.
10 minutes. Yeah. Okay, people are willing to go for it.
Thank you for the opportunity to be here today. Rebecca Kopczynski, the Director of the Personnel Review Commission. I do have a presentation. I will go through it as quickly as I can. Happy to provide any other additional information at the end of this, obviously, and answer any questions you may have. Before I begin, I would like to take a moment to shout out to the OBM. The team that has been helping me all through this process has been remarkable. Anthony Henderson, an extraordinary character and patience, and his supervisor, Chuck Cavano, and Maggie Keenan at OBM. We don't have a fiscal person in our office per se, and they have been very, very helpful throughout this process. So without further ado, I'm going to move through this relatively quickly, start with a quick review of our 2017 budget. Our budget this year was $1,733,000 to $695 change, sort of there. 94% of our budget is personnel costs. So I think it's important as we move through this information that you keep that in mind because you'll see some of the recommendations for 2018 next year are going to impact our staffing levels. Just as a reminder, we were here a year ago and asking for additional funding. Council did grant additional dollars to us to support the acquisition of another testing team member, and they supported our pay for performance plan. We do have data about that. If any of you are interested, we have presented that to the chairperson of the HR committee, but we're happy to share that as well. Very proud of how that rolled out and how that worked out for our employees. And we are on track this year to generate $15,000 in revenue. It's not a lot of money, but we do think that that represents the tip of the iceberg in terms of what might be available in the region in terms of services we can provide to the local communities. A brief overview of our 2018-2019 budget. The recommended budget is $1,575,000. This does reflect a reduction of $158,000, about 9%. And this is likely to impact our staffing. We really can't absorb this kind of a hit without laying off people, so probably going to be at least 2 FTEs if that goes through. We looked across our operations. So for those of you who are a little bit newer here on council, the PRC basically has 4 areas of operations. We hear appeals, we manage the county's class plan for classified positions, we generate civil service exams, administer those exams, and then we have a compliance operation. We looked across our departments, or our divisions, and found out that there are basically 5 drivers of our workload: the number of appeals that we hear, the number of postings put up by the county, the number of applications that we receive for those vacancies, the number of tests that we're actually required to conduct and develop in some cases, and then reorganization in the county's administration. I apologize, I took a Sudafed and my mouth is dry. It's important, I think, and I'll go into details on this in a minute. One of the things that we have noticed over the years is that appeals continue to go down. We hit our peak sort of in 2012. That number continues to drop drastically, which is a good thing. These other things, posting, applications, tests, and reorganization, have continued to increase over the past 2 years since we took over these operations. So I'm just going to spend a minute or two talking about those different indicators. You can see quickly here that the appeals, since we started getting them filed with the PRC since 2011, have dropped off significantly. The job vacancy postings, though, you'll see the first 2 green bars in these next 3 slides are all about 2015, 2016. We continue to see an increase in the number of vacancies that are posted. So we saw an increase last year of about 36%. We're on track this year at the rate that we're going so far to see a 39% increase. The number of applications that have come in. Our first year of doing this work, we saw 11,000. Last year, we were up to 15,700. We're on track this year to see about 24,000 applications, and this is a major driver of our work. It takes time to review them, and it takes time to handle the questions from this number of applicants. All of those things lead to the number of eligibility lists that we establish in a year, and you can see here that last year we saw a significant increase. We're also on track again this year for another about a 26% projected increase. And then finally, the new classifications. We know that in 2012, we saw a large number of new classifications that were created as a result of the reorganization. When we first started doing this in 2015, we saw a relatively small number of new classifications. Last year is a little bit higher. This year it's been significantly higher. We're on track to do about 3 times as many new classifications this year. So that obviously impacts our class and comp team, also impacts our testing team. So in summary, I'm sorry, I could use a drink. George, if you have a minute, if you could bring my water, that would help. We don't have a clear sense of what normal is yet for these operations. If you think back to when we first started the testing operations, we were told by the HR department at the time that they had done about 85 tests in the 3 years prior. Thank you. To date, we've done almost 300 in the past 3 years. So I don't think we know what this is going to look like long term. We're still very early in the stages of implementing these operations. The increased work levels that we're seeing, plus the proposed reduction, is going to have a pretty severe impact on human resources. We know they're going to be frustrated beyond the point that they already are because we're not able to get our work done quickly enough. It's going to impact the county's hiring managers. It's also going to impact those 20 or so thousand applicants that we deal with every year. And I'm here before you to ask that you would consider restoring us to the 2016 levels and provide us additional hiring or additional support to allow us to hire one more testing specialist for that testing team. And other than that, that's about as quickly as I can go.
Ms. Conwell.
Yes, through the chair to Rebecca. What role does in the hiring process will PRC play in the ERP employees?
So the classification and compensation team has been working with IT and developing those classifications. So they have been assisting in that. Obviously, when there's a new classification created, then the testing team is required to develop some sort of new procedure for selection for that role. So we'll be involved.
Okay,
we are
but
involved.
But so far you haven't been in any of the steering committees?
We're not on the steering committee, no.
Okay.
Not a part of that.
All right, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Anybody else?
Okay, and Councilman Tron.
So of the 25 new ads that are going into ERP, and we've been told that 6 have already been placed on inside the county, you have played what role in any of those 25 or the 6th?
Well, what we have done is the class and comp team has worked with the ERP team to develop those new classifications. At some point, I expect, from what we've heard today, that the PRC will also be seeing something in the way of proposed elimination of other classifications that somewhere in the future between those departments where they're talking about reorganizing work.
So you've seen the 6?
The 6?
We were told that 6 have already been hired against the 25.
I don't know. I can't
least that's
speak
what I
to how
thought
many
I
have been
heard.
hired. I can tell you how many of the new classifications that have been made, and I believe that we presented for approval 8 classifications that council has approved. I can confirm that with our team when I get back.
I'd like to see all 25 when you get to.
Yeah, that's fine. We can do that.
Anything else? Okay.
Thank you so
very much. We appreciate your presentation and we'll consider what you've requested. As far as miscellaneous business is concerned, we don't have any except to say thanks, everybody. This has been a slog. We do have 3 minutes to go. Miss Lou.
3 minutes to go. It's supposed to end at 1 and 3. Man, I must be got the times wrong.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon. Thank you for hanging in there.
Yeah, well, I'm trying to learn as fast as possible too, as this is my first time to attend all the budget hearings, and I didn't realize how important they actually are to even just ordinary county residents. not just important to you only, it's also for people who didn't think of anything about the county operations, this and that. Yes, in general, people will come here to complain, but now we can see why. When you have all these important offices, they are under budgeted. And the thing is, for some reason, it seems like county missed certain opportunities to actually generate extra revenue. Good example will be the Q transformation project. As Warrensville mayor, he mentioned, we could leverage that, which will help not just wait for the future, as Mr. Jones explained to us. We probably could have got some revenues in earlier than that future after they finished everything. So in that case, maybe we should reconsider how certain departments they work on themselves, working under the budget, but not thinking about having the new innovations or certain other strategies will help them to get better funding resources. Of course, if that can happen, that means all departments can all get the help they need to do their jobs, to offer services to all the county residents. I'm not sure if I got the wrong message, but that's the message I have gotten today. Thank you.
Thank you very much. The next meeting is tomorrow at 1 o'clock. No one else is signed in, am I correct? Okay, there being no further business, we stand adjourned. Thank you very much, everybody.